Have you ever watched something that completely rewired your brain chemistry?
A procedural network drama might not be your usual pick, but it's ours.
This is The Buddie System, a 911 deep dive podcast hosted by three friends who have DM'd each other enough character dissertations to earn a PhD in media literacy.
I'm Han, coming to you straight from the characters' heads.
I'm Sil, bringing you to the observation deck.
And I'm Rachel, connecting the dots with my red string.
With our powers combined,
No stone is left unturned.
And no buddy is left behind.
It's a bird. It's a plane. It's a plot device. Welcome to another special of the Buddie System podcast. This is the runner-up in the poll that we put out when the hiatus started, and we wanted to see what y'all wanted to hear.
Hiatus is just about to end, and what better time to break down how Tommy Kinard is nothing but a plot device.
why is it relevant, you ask? He's gone. Well, the answer is simple. It all comes back to Buddie. What is a plot device anyway? Ew.
So a plot device is a narrative technique that moves the plot forward. It creates drama or introduces new elements, and that is its only goal.
Yeah, plot devices can be characters, objects, situations, or changes in the story world.
More specifically, Tommy is a plot device character, and that means a character whose only purpose is to advance the plot of a story, often with little to no development or depth beyond their function in driving the narrative.
So that means that a character used as a plot device will have limited to no character development. So they often lack complex motivations, backstories, or personal growth, and they exist solely to trigger specific plot points.
They also just exist for the plot. So their actions are primarily driven by the need to move the story forward, not by their own internal desires.
And they're easily replaceable. Another character could often fulfill the same function in the plot if the plot device character was removed.
Mm-hmm.
Think of a stock character, which are archetypal characters distinguished by their simplification and flatness. As a result, they tend to be easy targets for parody and to be criticized as cliches.
So basically, we're saying that Tommy is a MacGuffin, and a MacGuffin is a plot device in fiction that is necessary to the part of the story, but is not very important in itself. It's a trigger that gets the story moving and can be an object, event, or character. You'll see this a lot of times with Indiana Jones, like with Raiders of the Lost Ark. The Ark of the Covenant is a MacGuffin, like the Crystal Skull in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. That's a MacGuffin. So it's like, it's this thing that basically incites the plot. The object itself or the character itself is not like the most important part. The most important part is the character's journey.
That the MacGuffin incites.
Yeah. Like, does that make sense? So those are a couple examples.
Like, Tommy is not important to the 911 universe outside of the specific things he was deployed as a plot device for. So what we're going to specifically do in this episode is different than what we normally do, because we're not getting into character analysis. We are not really going to talk about Tommy's backstory because guess what? He doesn't have one. And that's exactly why we're here today. We're going to take a look through the timeline that he pops up in and talk about why he was there each time in that instance and why he was deployed as a plot device. So there are going to be some things that, like, you're going to be like, why won't they talk more about that? We will.
We will.
But it just is not going to specifically be related to this. And we're trying to stay on topic because there's already a lot to get into here. And we might have some cool episodes coming up in a couple months, which would get into that, you know, more of like specific queer coding of characters or like the love triangle of it all or the buddy of it all. We'll get into a little bit of that, but only insofar as like he was employed to do this, to incite this. We're not going to be like diving as deep as we normally would. We're kind of going to be diving more deep into like
The narrative structure of it.
blocking and the narrative structure. Exactly.
Less so character stuff.
So without further ado, let's do this one last time.
One last time.
Oh, it could be. I was thinking Spider-Verse.
I was thinking Spider-Verse too,
Damn.
but that's a good one too.
But that, yeah.
It always comes back to Hamilton too, somehow.
Yeah.
It does.
Tommy Kinard is bones. Don't teach me how to say goodbye. I don't need to.
Say goodbye instead of saying hello. Let's be real. Let's take it all the way back to 2005 and season 2, episode 12, Chimney Begins. I know it feels like we were just here because we were.
Because we were. This is like the freshest in our memory, actually, which is kind of funny.
Basically, he fits into, in this episode and in Him Begins, this classic stock character. Like, think about a stock character like an NPC.
Yeah.
They're normally going to fall into like a specific, like stereotypical trope. So the one that he falls into in these 2 specific episodes is the closeted bully. And to give you a good example of that to compare it to, another Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk show, Glee.
Shocker.
With David Karofsky. And he bullies Kurt in all of season 1. Like verbally and physically. And then in season 2, it's revealed that he is secretly gay. The difference here is that Karofsky actually goes from being a stock character actually getting some character development once it's revealed that to the audience that he's gay. That happens in season 2.
As in he gets his own storyline.
Yes.
Where there are episodes or part of episodes that are actually centered on him specifically, not necessarily like in relation to anyone else.
One of the most famous episodes of Glee centers around him. He goes through a whole journey where, like, even though he's closeted, like he's him and Santana like team up to be each other's beards and like run for prom king and queen, and like they're doing like anti-bullying stuff for the schools,
like PSAs.
Yeah, so like he becomes more of a 3-dimensional character. So even though he's still closeted, he's not bullying people. So there's character development, and then you get to learn a little bit more about him outside of just being a bully. And he's closeted and gay, which is kind of all we know about Tommy. Especially in these first 2 episodes.
What I want to know then is just kind of taking these 2 examples, because I think that is a great comparison. So in both of these, you do have this closeted bully character who is not specifically mentioned, or like we have no clue. If we were watching live, we would have no clue that that character is gay. Until later. So do you think this would also be an example of like retconned into gay character? Or
well, I don't think so. I mean, like, it makes sense in both cases, but it is very much, it fits into that like stereotypical, they were a bully because they were closeted.
And by retcon, I mean from their first episode, it may not have been in like the writer's minds, but
it was not.
But then
intended.
they decided, this is a good jumping off point.
It was not intended
for later. Yeah,
I don't think. I know for Tommy it wasn't, because Tim Eininger has said that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And Lou Ferrigno Jr. has said that. I don't actually know for Glee. I used to, like, fun fact for anyone who doesn't know, I used to be obsessed with Glee. I was a huge like in Glee fandom. Yeah, I don't want to say Gleek. It's just like it triggers me. But anyway, I was really just there for Kurt and Blaine. Shocking, I know. And Santana. I love Santana.
Still, did you ever watch Glee?
Nope.
Wow.
Good for you.
Listen,
I'm sorry. I'll ingest as someone who has also watched it.
Yeah. He's very much the closeted bully stock character in these episodes. And he's really just like in Chimneys, we see him being a racist bully.
Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
It's this thing with both Chimney Begins and Hen Begins that he is like actively contributing to the hostile environment that we see our main characters, which are Chimney and Hen, having to deal with. And he's just kind of there and is part of the problem, but like in the background, you know? I would say like generally for both of them, I think the main antagonist would have been like Gerard, right? For both.
Yeah.
And then Tommy's just there.
Yeah, Tommy's like a goon, whereas like I think Karofsky was like the head of the bullies because I think he was like some position
Like
on the football team that's important. I don't fucking know.
Captain or something.
Yeah. Oh yeah, captain. There we go.
Sports.
So sports captain and a captain.
Yeah.
You know, Gerard's also kind of a plot device. We won't get into that. We're not here to talk about Gerard, but he is actively contributing to the horribleness. The good thing to do would be to like say something.
Mm-hmm.
But it would even be more understandable if he just like kind of was trying to be invisible and like not draw attention to himself.
Mm-hmm.
It would be more understanding. But no, he's just there to be a bully. Like that's literally his entire journey in this episode. And we only see him showing Chim respect or that he like has any value after Chim saves his life.
That's the only reason that he becomes friendlier. I wouldn't even say like the most friendly, and they're not best buds, as we see with Hen Begins. Like, so when you think there's a little bit of ground to be made in Chimney Begins for Tommy, like it just kind of reverts back with Hen Begins. It's a little confusing because technically Hen Begins, the episode aired before Chimney Begins, but chronologically they're flipped.
Yes.
So that's also something to keep in mind too, because like any ground you make towards any kind of character development is, you know, null and void when it comes to Hen Begins, because he is also actively bullying. He's being very sexist as well. There were even some homophobic comments.
Yeah, so I mean, he's still being racist in Hen Begins, but now he's also being sexist and homophobic. So we actually have a quote from an interview with Lou Ferrigno Jr.
Okay, this is from 911's Lou Ferrigno Jr. reflects on Tommy and Buck's heart-wrenching breakup and why the role was a true blessing by Nicole Gallucci from Decider. So he says, there's a moment when, even unbeknownst to me, because Tommy was not by any means queer or whatnot in my mind. If anything, he was a little homophobic. So it looks like Tim is a wizard, which he pretty much is. It looks like he's been planning this all along and just didn't tell us, but it's pretty cool, especially going back to the beginning of the series.
Yeah, so that is a big indicator that not only to the actor playing him, but also, you know, the creator of the show, the writers, Tim Minear, they didn't set out to make Tommy like gay specifically. So only in retrospect, because now we're looking at it like from a whole perspective sort of view. So we have to look at these very early appearances of him being racist and sexist and homophobic, and can only determine that he was being this archetype of the classic closeted bully, right?
Instead of just the regular one.
Instead of just a regular bully. Neither of them are great.
A special, even worse stereotype.
Yeah. So it's really kind of smart that they went back and they retconned it this way, because, you know, you do have some of these little sprinkles of, what was it that Tommy said in this episode? Something, they were talking about Twilight, right? Because it's like 2008 or something.
When he was like Team Jacob or something.
Yeah. And then someone, I think it was Sal, said something, and then Chimney chimed in and he's like, he's calling you gay.
Yeah.
Like,
and he just like made a kissy face.
Yeah. So, which is interesting to look at through the lens of now knowing that this character is gay, but it's just stock character. Like there's no real individuality there.
Nope.
And also, like in Chimney Begins, Tommy only shows respect to Hen after she's earned it, right? In quotation marks. And not even necessarily that he thinks she's earned it. It's when like Gerard even has kind of been like, okay, you've earned it, I guess, you know?
Well, it's right before like she gets called into the office and they're like, Gerard's gone, and she thinks she's going to get fired. Yeah. So it's like, and they all knew that that's what she was getting pulled into. So I don't know. I saw that more of a like him falling in line because there was a new captain coming in, you know, that he's like, oh, the status quo of like what this place is going to be like is going to change, and I'm falling in line with that.
Yeah. And not to get like too character in here, but like we do see in these 2 episodes that this is a character who goes with the crowd, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the status quo and the people who are more in power. He's a lackey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is.
Lackeys do not really get development.
No, because that's not what they're there for. They're not there to have a personality or a character arc. They're there to do whatever the bidding of the person that they're doing bidding for is. That's it. They're a device, always. Lackeys are always a device. But yeah, and then we have season 2, episode 16 with Bobby begins again. And it looks like he's on good terms with Hen and Chim as coworkers. I think they've been through like 6 captains before Bobby shows up. So like, I guess they're, getting along as coworkers after the events of Chimney and Hen begins.
Yeah, they kind of have to because of the revolving door of captains. And this is supposed to take place between like 2014 and 2017, roughly, right? So like there's been a lot of time in between, like where we would have last seen in like 2008 with Hen Begins. And it's just like,
so they've been working together for a while.
Yeah, but it's still like you don't really see a lot of their really buddy. Like they've become good friends.
We don't see them acting like our core 4 together at all.
It's just coworkers. And like he's just there.
He is literally just there. He is there for a lot of the episode when they're at the 118, but like I don't think we even really learn anything about him.
Besides the scene that stands out.
Isn't it the one where they're having drinks and Bobby shows up? Yeah, I think we only learn about because everyone's just showing off their scars.
Yeah.
So I don't remember how he got it.
I don't remember either.
But yeah, I mean, that's where everyone seems to be very amicable. And like, it's very clear that he was just like a stand-in for, Buck to come in and, join the 118 after, Tommy leaves.
That's very much what it gives because as soon as Tommy's gone, Buck shows up.
Yep.
As
a literal replacement. And from then you see like the core 4 develop, right? And it really kind of like from the get-go with that just shows how much the inclusion of Buck into the 118 as a found family really solidifies. And I mean, when you look at it like without Buck, they were just coworkers. With Buck, now they're a family. So what's the difference there? And it's literally
definitely not Tommy.
Yeah. So in that episode, like Tommy is a plot device to bring Buck in, like his leaving, like opens the door. It creates a vacuum for Buck to come in and fill that space. And then Tommy's just gone. So it's like, it's nice that they had him. And we don't even get like any redemption with that either. It's just like, they're just on better terms now. But there's no like even line of exposition for explanation to like, yeah, they're on good terms. Because they were still kind of like.
And here's the thing is like, if you want to say, oh, well, they were out for drinks after work. They were talking about work. So it was coworkers getting drinks after work, which some coworkers do to complain about work. Like they were not talking about their lives.
No, it wasn't like a friend hang. It was a drinks after work.
And it was very much Hen deploying, hey, let's go get drinks so she could invite Bobby and get them on Bobby's side because she knew stuff that they didn't about DeLuca. Yeah. That's all it was.
Yeah. Like, so again, Tommy was just there because he's part of the pack, right? And not for any like, they really wanted to include Tommy specifically. It was just like a general outing. So,
I mean, just to like bring it into different terms, because like I'm sure most people, well, I'm assuming, but I assume that most people listening to this podcast aren't in the first responder profession. So I'm just thinking about like retail, food service, that kind of thing. Think about how like you would have a group chat to complain about work with people who like you wouldn't necessarily call friends or hang out with outside of maybe grabbing a drink to bitch about work.
Yeah.
That's what it is. That's all it was.
The bonding is still work focused.
Yeah, it's camaraderie at work
Yes.
building.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not, oh, we're sharing
companionship.
details about our lives and ourselves and we're friends. That's not what that was at all.
Because that implies people have to like actually communicate about their backstories and lives, and Tommy didn't have any.
Yeah.
Except for that one story.
Oh, he does say, I'm remembering what he says though, when he's showing, he's like, yeah, like basically like chicks really dig the scars or something.
He doesn't
When
even
he's showing a scar.
He doesn't even give a story for how he got it.
I can't remember, even though I watched it yesterday. Because I just literally was like, this was nothing sauce. I was like, he was just there.
Yeah.
Again, like an NPC. Like you could just swap out any other character. And you know what I mean? You could have put DeLuca there. Any other. It was just because he had a name.
It's because he had a name and he was already established.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's why they brought him in. So they didn't have to introduce a new character.
Exactly.
We'll see that pop up occasionally.
We'll see it pop up further in as we go along here. So just again, in the next one we're going to talk about very briefly in season 2, episode 14, you don't even see him. Do you even hear him?
There's like a mumble on the other side of the phone, but
it's a hey something.
Yeah, I don't think it's LFJ. I think it's just someone mumbling.
Yeah, I don't think they brought him in
to record like one line.
No.
No.
How much would that be?
So much, because it would be a speaking line, so they would have to pay like SAG after.
Yeah. So
it was probably like we see with the promos where, you know, where they accidentally, where they have someone like dub in the cue, like cue in the actors, and they for some reason keep forgetting to ADR it with the actual like child. Mama.
Jesus Christ.
Which was fixed for the episode.
We were like, is this a horror movie? Anyway. So yeah, he's literally just, again, used as a plot device because Dispatch is down in chimneys watching the television. Like, they need water. How do I get them water? And then he is like, oh, Tommy, who works at Harbor, who flies the things that have the water.
The planes?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, and the only reason we know that's Tommy, besides Chimney saying like, hey Tommy, is because in Bobby Begins Again, Tommy leaves, and they say specifically for like on the cake, it's like the 217. So that happens to be the Harbor station. So that was also, it's a connected plot device there.
Which is smart to use because it makes the universe feel more real,
more established.
When you're using like similar characters instead of having a new person for every single thing.
Instead of Chimney just like calling up this random person that, you know, you'd never heard him talk about before. It's like the audience then has that pre-established knowledge, awareness, connection, but barely to a character. So it's like, oh, okay, this is feeling like, you know, a real universe.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that that is the character that flies the planes. And that's it.
That's all.
You don't even see him on screen. Not even a shot of an actor in the plane. It's just the plane from like the outside. So it's technically not even an appearance. It's just like an awareness that that is who that's supposed to be. But so like the fact that we don't even see him at all, or like gearing up to be like, you know, sometimes if a character makes a call like that, you would
see an establishing shot of them.
Yeah, exactly. And it would be like them picking up the phone, being like, oh, hey, Jim, haven't heard from you in a while. Da-da-da. Of course. And then like gearing up to do the thing. None of that.
No. I mean, that would still make him a plot device, but at least
but
he
that
would be on screen. Yeah. Then 5 peaceful years went by where no one again remembered that he existed. And then it's season 7. And then in season 7, episode 3, he showed up again as a plot device to help rescue Athena and Bobby and reintroduce him into the narrative to interact with Buck and Eddie, which was jumpstarting Buck's queer journey, inciting the incident for the jealousy regarding Eddie
Yeah, so he was introduced again as the same kind of plot device that we just saw with Broken, where he was there because he does the plane stuff, right? And they needed to get to the boat or the ship, excuse me. They needed to get to the ship.
Plane stuff, TM.
It's essentially the same thing. They're utilizing his connection with Harbor to access Bobby and Athena stranded in the middle of the ocean in a hurricane, right? They wouldn't be able to get to them otherwise. So from there, it's also he is a plot device because he is reintroduced into the narrative to interact with Buck and Eddie specifically.
Yeah. But before we get to that, he is only there because the actress who plays Lucy, Lucy was supposed to pilot the helicopter used to rescue Bobby and Athena from the cruise ship disaster from the 3-part premiere. But because of her role in Fox's Rescue High Surf, she was unavailable for the scene.
So that comes from an article from The Wrap with an interview with Tim Minear. And Tim Minear also said that because Tommy already exists in this universe, like we were just saying, that allowed him to establish.
It was supposed to be Lucy, but because she wasn't available, he went, who else flies helicopters?
The season 6 finale, it had Lucy come back because she was doing the helicopter. And I think this was a mistake that Bobby at some point said like Kinard, but I don't think it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
It was just like a name.
Yeah. Then we have some nice little quotes from, well, actually, one quote that stood out to me, which was very much giving plot device, which was when Tommy comes up, when Hen shows up at Harbor and is like, I need to, an emergency acquisition of a helicopter for whatever. And the guy's arguing with her, like, the Gulf of Mexico? That's not our territory. And Tommy comes up and she's like, I forgot you were stationed at Harbor. She hasn't talked to this man since he left the 118. She forgot that he existed.
Just tying into what you just said, like, it's the blatant trying to, like, bring him into the narrative that gives plot device.
Yeah, so, like, she's like, I forgot you were here. And then he walks up and he's like, Hen and I used to work at the 118 together for years and blah, 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 blah. So, like, he's, like, reestablishing himself, just trying to put himself in the narrative. And, like, then we find out that he already was ripped into this by Chimney. Chimney saved this guy's life. So he owes him, like, I feel like infinite favors.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't think this was a we talk all the time and I just called in a favor from a friend thing.
No, it's like only when they need something.
Only when they need something, you know? And in the next episode, Tommy says himself that he's jealous of how they seem to operate like a family and how the 118 is so different from when he worked there. So he's like trying to put himself in the narrative, but he doesn't belong there because he's a plot device. It's literally is all done so purposefully.
Definitely.
So we get some foreshadowing at the end of 703 for 704 and onward with this love triangle where Bobby and Athena are reuniting, and watching them is Eddie and Tommy and Buck. Eddie's on the left, Tommy is in the middle, and Buck is on the right. Tommy's in the middle of Buck and Eddie, right? Then Eddie walks away and Tommy moves to walk after him, but Buck stops him with a hand on his shoulder. And then Buck walks away, and then you see him walking next to Eddie. So I just feel like this just foreshadows the entire thing, which is just that the three of them meet. And then Tommy tries to go after Eddie, but then Buck steps in and is like, no, wait.
It acts as an establishing like visual device for how their interactions are kind of going to go moving forward, right? It sets it up visually that Tommy is kind of trying to put himself into the narrative, and specifically into the narrative regarding Buck and Eddie on a more personal basis, and just kind of like wedging himself in. Because we see that, and I think we have some notes like further down with similar blocking where it's that triangular pattern again.
You've seen it, you've watched it, but you're going to keep hearing us bring that blocking because it's very intentional. Blocking is really intentional. It literally,
has to
they
be.
have to, like, the director picks it out and then they put tape down and the actors have to, like, stand in a specific place. It's all, I mean, every part of television is really intentional, but blocking is normally something that's used as a narrative device.
Kind of moving from him being a plot device of being the pilot, right? It transitions him into being the plot device for Buck to realize that he's bisexual, and Buck's queer journey and the like inciting incident for Buck's jealousy regarding Eddie and misplacing his feelings. With Tommy kind of inserting himself into Buck and Eddie's friendship, we'll say.
Whatever they got going on, he's inserting
Whatever
himself
that
in
is.
between it.
We don't have time to unpack all of that.
There's friendship, and then there's whatever those two have going on.
So is it safe to say us seeing Tommy for the rest of his appearance on the show from 704 onwards to 808 is specifically Tommy being there as his role as a plot device for Buck's queer journey and to realize that he's bi? And specifically in 704, it's a redirect of Buck's jealousy of like Eddie and Tommy and Buck misplacing his feelings.
He's kind of almost like a foil.
That's exactly what it is for Eddie.
Yeah, and that's how he's misdirecting feelings.
Mm-hmm. So in an interview with Tim Minear, where he's talking about 704 and Buck's big romantic moment, which has been in the works for a long time, as the article states. It's from The Wrap. So Minear says that he thought Buck and Tommy would have good chemistry. And because Tommy already exists in the universe, which we had just mentioned, that allowed them to establish a new love interest for Buck without having to invent and introduce an entirely new character, which is what they oftentimes do for love interests, right?
Mm-hmm.
Tim went on and said, Tommy is currently an important romantic partner for Buck, largely because it's sort of the entry-level relationship. Nobody's making wedding plans.
And that should have been the hint.
Here's your sign.
Yeah.
This is a plot device. He's literally just saying it. Like, he's here to establish this new thing.
Everything that Tim just said about Tommy is in relation to what it can do for Buck. Mm-hmm. That indicates that Tommy
Nothing about Tommy.
Yeah, that indicates that Tommy is not like a fully fleshed out character of his own. He is only there for Buck's character development.
And not indicating that he plans on fleshing him out any further than he already isn't.
And he says it's an important romantic partner for Buck, not an important character. An important partner for Buck because it's an entry-level relationship. So that implies that Tim already knew.
Tim already knew it was going to be his first, not his last.
Yeah, like a good time, not a long time, right? Which is what you kept saying. And nobody's making wedding plans. So like I know Tim also says things change all the time and they're always like currently writing and like redrafting things. To say like nobody's making wedding plans means that they did not have solid anticipation of Tommy being endgame for Buck, you know? Like,
nope.
Entry level relationship, not endgame level relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important, I think, piece of context.
Yeah.
To keep in mind that, like, as we're looking at it from a narrative perspective and like how the writers were dealing with Tommy as a character, which was to say like not much at all, that they had in mind that he wasn't going to be here for a long time.
No, he's here to affect Buck and Eddie.
That's it.
That's it. So speaking of, in 704, Buck Bothered, Bewildered, one of the best episodes of 911. I do say so myself. It is perfection. It is, I love seeing Buck spiral out. And this was just
chef's kiss.
Anytime we get to see an episode from his point of view.
And they do that a bit. It's so fun.
They do. Yeah, because he is like the world's most unreliable narrator.
It also like adds an extra layer. So like as like we're interpreting that episode, we also have to think like keep reminding
We're
ourselves
interpreting it from Buck's interpretation.
Buck's point of view. So
Yeah.
like everything is funneled through his perspective,
Mhm.
which makes things that kind of much more interesting because it's not as straightforward as some other episodes may be because of the unreliable narrator thing, which is just fun.
The first scene we see of Buck and Tommy together in this episode is at Harbor Station. We're just going to go through some quotes, some dialogue here. That's just, dialogue is the most intentional thing I think you can do when you're doing a television show. Tommy says to him, "Come on, you didn't call me because you wanted to see the toys, the helicopters. You're thinking of changing things up, aren't you?"
This whole conversation is very
the double, everything is
the
a double
double
entendre in
entendres.
this entire conversation. He can't even just like talk to Buck thinks that he went there because he wanted to be friends with Tommy, but he can't even like get to know Tommy without bringing up Eddie. He's so much like Tim Minear in that way. He can't not make things about Eddie. But he finds out that Tommy was a pilot in the army, and he's like, no way, Eddie was in the army.
No, but for that also, with Buck immediately bringing Eddie into the conversation, that, like you said earlier, that does indicate that Tommy is a foil for Eddie, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they're putting up, okay, these characters have these similarities, and it's basically like a stand-in for Eddie.
Uh-huh. The most surface level stand-in you could imagine. Yeah.
Because they're continually bringing up like, oh, no way, Eddie was in the army. Oh, no way, Eddie likes Muay Thai. Like all of that stuff is just to show how similar Tommy is to Eddie, which still means like, even though you're getting what you think are these little like snippets and little bite-sized pieces of Tommy's character, to align that with Eddie is basically not giving Tommy his own character, right? It's just similarities to Eddie.
Why is it that it took us 7 seasons to, or sorry, 5, because I guess he didn't show up till 2. Why did it take us 5 seasons to get any kind of backstory? And this isn't even backstory. These are just like facts. He likes this thing. He was in this thing. And every single thing we learn is a thing that he has in common with Eddie. It's almost like
he's a mirror.
It was done on purpose.
Yeah, he is the mirror still.
So Tommy says, there's no rule that says you can't get certified and still stay at the 118. I fly for fun on my days off. Very much giving, you can have your cake and eat it too. Just the double entendre, like implications of
both
the bisexuality of it all.
¿Por qué no las dos?
¿Por qué no las dos?
Yeah, and then there's more blocking in this scene too when Eddie finally comes into the picture. And this one has Eddie on the left, and that was the same as the last time, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so in this case, Eddie is still on the left, but Buck is in the middle. And so it's kind of like he's torn between 2 options. Imagine that.
Well, to me, this is an odd man out situation.
That too.
So in 703, it's Tommy is the person who's in between Buck and Eddie, who are established. Even if you don't think of them as romantic, they are an established duo, like soul do not separate. It's always Buck and Eddie. Buck and Eddie do this, Buck and Eddie. So he was in between them, literally and figuratively. And now Buck is the one who feels like he's in between them. Feels like I'm out of place.
But also kind of like torn between 2 with Buck under the guise of, exploring things at Harbor, right? You have Tommy representing something new and different with Harbor, but then you have Eddie coming in, which is, the 118 a little bit. So it's that extra layer of like having more choice, right? Essentially, it's a bisexual like.
It's a bisexual thing.
Yeah.
I just don't know that I agree if that what you're trying to say is like he's trying to decide between the 2 of them. I don't think I agree with that.
No, I'm not saying he's trying to decide between the 2. I'm just saying like there are multiple options available.
Oh, well, yes.
That's what I was saying.
And after Tommy says, I fly for fun on my days off, he says, I can give you lessons if you want. This entire conversation is just double entendres. It's not about flying. It's not about possibly switching stations. It's about switching teams. It's about teaching him other things.
Literally entry-level relationship, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. We mentioned like Buck was in the middle, and we were talking about how it's like a metaphor for bisexuality and having multiple options and other stuff.
Like you were going for the angle that it was other options, and Han was like Buck being an odd man out.
Yeah. I think it works on both.
It is,
both levels with that.
Both. I think he's really feeling like odd man out, and I feel like the rest of this conversation is like what puts him off kilter for the fucking spiral he has the rest of the episode. So
just to set the scene, I think they're like Tommy and Eddie are about to go to their whatever WrestleMania thing in Vegas. What is it?
Is it MMA or boxing or?
It's either MMA or like a UFC fight. I don't know. It's
people punching each other.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, so Eddie asks if Buck is coming along. Tommy saying, no, I'm just giving him a tour. And then Eddie goes, wait, you're not thinking about jumping ship, are you? Like jumping ship, that's very on the nose, calling us out, honestly.
Right?
Us as a fandom. It's kind of funny.
Oh my God.
Yeah, jumping ship, like relationships, like Buddie to whatever that would be. Tevin.
Stark does not approve that name, so I don't either.
No.
Yeah. I stand with Stark on that.
I love that they were the ones to
make their couple name.
Yeah. What a crazy thing to do.
So crazy. Anyway, Buck says, no, I'm just, keeping my options fluid.
Fluid.
That's self-explanatory. I mean,
it's just bisexual.
It's so blatantly obvious.
Well, to everyone but Buck, but yes.
Yeah. Well,
especially because we're looking at it from Buck's point of view. Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, so there's a fight. I was unaware.
Like literally Buck was unaware that he had
to fight for Eddie's attention and time.
Well, that he had to fight for Eddie's attention, but also he was unaware that he leaned in multiple directions with his sexuality too. That's how I read that. Like I wasn't aware until you become aware, And how does he become aware? It's just Tommy. That's what Tommy's there for, to make Buck aware.
So, I mean, and then there's like the obvious one, just like he's just unaware that whatever the hell this Tommy and Eddie thing is happening. Like he's just unaware of that. And that is just making him go like,
the fuck?
The fuck is happening here?
Right. We're supposed to know everything
why
about
was
you.
I not involved?
Literally, I am also here. I can't look at anything from this episode as not being about Eddie until the very end when he takes all of those feelings about Eddie and throws them on the foil. So to me, there's a fight. I was unaware because it's very much like he was kind of like flirty and like, with Tommy, but then Eddie showed up and he was like, what are you doing? Oh, you're going to a thing together. Huh, that's so cool.
And he's gonna fly you there.
Interesting. Oh, you're flying there? Huh.
This is where he's really feeling that odd man out.
Yes. Yeah. So that's when that triangular blocking is. And you can look at his face and he's like, I don't like this. He's not like it. He feels uncomfy. But so there's a fight. I was unaware. To me is very much, I had to fight for Eddie's attention. I was unaware. I was unaware that he had other friends, period.
It's like, I knew that he had a weird, like, underground poker night thing, but I was invited.
Yeah. Eventually.
Eventually. Exactly. Yeah. Like, Eddie always clues him in eventually, but it's just like, but I do like the way that everything that's said here can be taken, in terms of like Buck's relationship with Eddie, but also like Buck's relationship with his sexuality. So it's so layered in a way that's like kind of delicious because there's multiple ways to read it that still make sense, but they all emphasize how Tommy's just there in a different way. That's like, I am also here. It's just, no, he's there.
He exists for now.
That just sounded so threatening. For now.
I'm not the one who made him bones. I'm just an observer.
So when just as they're leaving, Tommy says, let me know if you want to go up.
As in like level up?
Go up.
Like level up in his sexuality,
Where?
go up in the skies, like to because he was gonna give him lessons.
Yes, I got it in like the plane helicopter.
Let me know
way,
if you want me to give you lessons, is what that basically is.
Mm.
Yeah. So then that gets in Buck's head.
then we flash to the sewer rescue, where Buck's, trying to be supportive. I feel like this whole episode, for the most part, Buck is trying to be supportive because he knows he shouldn't like feel whatever the fuck he's feeling. Like that's his own problem. He's trying not to make it Eddie's problem. And he's like, he's allowed to have other friends.
He's trying to work
should
through
be supportive, right? But also he just needs to know more information because he needs to know everything about Eddie.
Because he thought he did know everything.
Yeah. So he's asking him like how the fight was. And Eddie is like telling him how like Tommy's friends with the promoter and like the seats were so close. I felt like I was the one throwing the punches, which
he has done before.
But I also thought it was funny because it's widely recognized in fandom. And I don't know if this was on purpose for the writers, but later in this conversation, when he says, it's like that thing where you meet somebody and you just click. You know what I mean? It's throwing a punch.
Oh, that's how you were like, okay.
He's getting back at Buck for being like, I feel like she really sees me.
That is Eddie using Tommy as a plot device to kind of like, twist a little knife about Buck a bit.
For him to be like, how's that feel? It's very much just giving him with Josh.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Waiting for that moment. Yeah.
He waits for the most opportune time to throw the punch. He waits until the defenses are down.
Yeah, because he is like Sassmaster 3000.
And a seasoned fighter. Ravi's so here for the tea.
Yeah, like Buck and Eddie are just like talking about Tommy, and then Robbie's just like, who's Tommy? Which is honestly a funny line because I mean, like, really, who is Tommy? Like, we don't.
What are you doing here?
What are you doing here?
He doesn't even go here.
What purpose do you have? I mean, we're discussing the purpose, but still, like, what?
Yeah, that's just to say, like, who's Tommy? Because it's nobody that important to the greater 118 family, right?
It wasn't even important enough for him to be spoken about when telling the story about rescuing Bobby and Athena. They didn't even drop Tommy's name. We're talking about the helicopter. Just doesn't matter.
I was just about to ask, was he even introduced to Tommy? Then I was like, oh no, they shared that one scene in the medal ceremony.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the rest of the scene with like the sewer rescue is just like more either double entendre and a way to get under Buck's skin and just like more aligning Tommy with Eddie, because we have Buck saying like, I'm not surprised that you had a great time in Vegas. You and Tommy have a lot in common. Both in the army, both like watching half-naked men pummel each other. Which,
who fucking wrote this episode?
This is Buck, Bothered, and Bewildered. It's Andrew Myers.
Crazy work, honestly.
This is Andrew Myers.
King. That's some king shit right there.
Hold on, now I have to double check it.
I think you're right.
I think you're right. I think that's who it is.
Because we just watched...
Both like watching half-naked men pummel each other.
Because we just watched...
Ocean's 911.
And that was, I think, Andrew Myers' first episode that he wrote for 911. And we talked in our episode about how it was such a great ensemble episode and he got the characters so well. This is more example. This is his writing. He understands the characters so well. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why Tommy works so well as a foil, as a mirror to Eddie specifically, because they know how to write. It's not exactly a copy paste, but it's like Tommy was a blank enough slate that they could put whatever else they wanted to onto him. And they chose then to make that an Eddie mirror. And that's good writing. Good writing, Andrew Myers. Thank you.
I'm still staring at this.
Crazy work. Both in the army, both like watching half-naked men pummel each other. He just said you're gay. He just said you're both gay.
The thing is, though, I don't even feel like most of this conversation even pertains to Buck's sexuality as much.
It's Eddie.
It's Eddie's. So Tommy is then pulling double duty. He's not in this scene. They're just talking about Eddie's interactions with Tommy, again, not Tommy specifically, Eddie's interactions, and aligning their similar likes and tastes. So, like, what are we supposed to do with that? They are making Tommy and Eddie so similar. It's not, this isn't even about Buck at the moment. This is aligning Tommy to pull double duty as a plot device to show things about Eddie's tastes, if you will.
It's employed so fucking well. I mean, like, constantly for like the entire time he's here, but like especially this episode is just like...
Yeah, because then, you know, Eddie's like, yeah, Tommy's pretty cool. It's been a while since I met someone who can go toe-to-toe with me in Muay Thai. And Buck's all like, you guys went to Muay Thai together?
Now he's picturing them pummeling each other half naked.
Yeah, which also, like, it's so interesting that it's like Muay Thai, professional fights, army are very like boys club, masculine kind of thing, especially if they're watching a fight and that is like wrestling. It's also very performative, right? It's performative masculinity. So if we're putting all of these things in and lumping them in with things that Eddie likes, it is performative masculinity. What do you do when you pick that apart? It's gay.
So then Buck is like, you guys did Muay Thai together? Because he just said that pummeling, you like watching men pummeling each other half naked. But now he's picturing the two of them. And he's
pummeling
like,
each other half naked.
Yeah, he's like, you did that together? And Eddie's still waxing poetic. Like, yeah, he's got this great setup in his garage. We sparred a bit when I took the Chevelle over. And then goes on later to say, yeah, he's got a car lift. The guy really knows his engine. You should hear that thing purr now.
I'm sorry.
Out of pocket. Out of pocket. I don't want to get too deep into the Eddie stuff because we're going to save that for an Eddie episode. But these are the things that Buck is hearing and just, what is he supposed to, where do you think his mind is going with this shit? And why do you think it makes him even more crazy?
I do also just want to very quickly relate that back to what Tommy said to Buck about, I can give you lessons if you want. As in, like, he is the knowledgeable one. He knows things that, like, Buck and Eddie do not know, has experiences that they maybe don't. And that is pretty much the only differences that we see between Tommy and Eddie. So to bring it back about, like, the guy really knows his engine. You should hear that thing purr now. Like, that's basically giving lessons, right? It's all very, is euphemistic a word?
It is now.
It's all very euphemistic.
For this episode, it is now.
Just mark that in Rachel's dictionary. one of those. It feels like something that they would say in Wicked and Oz.
So then Buck is, again, still trying to be supportive, and he think it's great. You can never have enough friends. And Eddie hits him with that line I mentioned earlier about you just click with someone. You know what I mean? And Buck is very forlorn, like, I do, I really do. And then I don't want to get further into this conversation too deeply, but like, I think Buck asks him when he's hanging out with Tommy again, and he's like, oh, he has this thing later this week, but like he doesn't have anyone to watch Christopher. And then asks Buck, what are you doing? And Buck gets really excited, but yeah, he just asked Buck to watch Christopher because he already asked Marisol twice that week.
It's giving stepping out on the town.
It's giving Buck feels like he's being replaced. And it's so purposeful to put Tommy into the Buck position, but
for
Buck
Eddie
will feel threatened by it because he has so much more in common with Eddie. And he's older and more experienced.
Yeah.
All right. So now we're shifting to like the conversation that he has. It's one of the first conversations that he has with Maddie about the Eddie and Tommy situation or whatever the fuck this is. Anyway, so he's talking to Maddie. He's basically airing out his grievances, especially after the, babysitting Christopher. Buck says, my point is he's made an impression in a very short time. And that Christopher wouldn't stop talking about him. And then how he's pointing out that on Eddie's calendar, he has the BBPU, which is the basketball pickup game with Tommy. And it's circled. And the way he says that, it's like doom and gloom.
Scandalous.
It's so scandalous. Like, how dare?
And
I think Maddie's like, well, you hate basketball. And then like, he's like, well, Eddie keeps asking me to go, which is why I say no. But now he's going with Tommy and he's got it circled. And then Maddie's like, is it circled with a heart around it?
Diabolical, Maddie.
Oh, yeah. Big sisterism right there.
The way the book says circled with a heart is how I imagine you tell your best friend or your older sibling that your significant other cheated on you. It's like, I'm supposed to be on the calendar circled. Museum trips, movie nights.
Like, I'm important. Like, the way he's reading it is, oh, this is very important. He's got it circled. Buck is just projecting, oh, like he's excited to go hang out with Tommy and not him. And it's just like, what about me? I'm also here.
This entire episode is Buck just being like, I'm also here. But like, even though this whole conversation revolves around Tommy, if you look a little further, it's actually about, I was about to say Oliver. It's actually...
Wait, what?
I mean,
I was about to say Oliver and I'm trying to like say Buck. It's because we keep saying that I am also here.
I'm also here.
Which is the most Oliver that Buck ever gets.
Mm-hmm.
No, so even though
it's because Cancer Sun, Cancer Moon.
Yes, it's little.
It's when the Cancer Moon jumps out.
It's the Tinkerbellism.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, so even though this whole conversation revolves around Tommy, what it actually is about is Buck's feeling of being left behind by Eddie because Eddie has found this new shiny toy to play with, right? So it's not actually about Tommy at all. It's about Buck and his feelings and his relationship with Eddie. And Tommy is just like, again, that MacGuffin to facilitate these feelings and this conversation taking place. It's not actually about Tommy as a person at all. It all revolves around how Buck is feeling about how Eddie is hanging out with this other guy. That's it. It's not about Tommy. That's what makes him the plot device. That's what I have to say about that.
I don't know if this is just me putting myself out there, but I'm like, listen. I mean, I'm strictly thinking about this like in a friendship point of view, but who the hell knows, because those lines get blurred and whatever. Eventually, that happens. But give or take, I mean, sometimes it's not. And sometimes it really is just like, I don't like, why are you not giving me enough attention? Like, why are you hanging out with this other person?
No, I get it. Whenever anyone in our friend group says they have plans with someone who is not in our friend group, we're like,
yeah.
Oh, we didn't approve that.
We didn't approve that.
There was no authorization to do that.
The council says no.
Veto. Well, you guys are like that.
Yeah, Rachel's not. Rachel wants to be friends with everyone.
Everyone is friendship until proven otherwise.
Oh.
Still being in Buck, Bothered, and Bewildered, we go to the basketball game.
So there's a couple of shots while the basketball game is happening. And I think there's two specifically where we get the triangle. And both of them, they're high-fiving Eddie and Tommy. First one, Tommy is on the left and Buck is in the middle. Eddie's on the right. Buck looks so pissy in both of these. He's ready to hurt someone. And then Tommy and Eddie are swapped in the next one where Eddie's on the left and Tommy's on the right. Then the camera zooms in on Buck being very pissed off, and Tommy leaves the frame first as it zooms in on Buck. You can't see Tommy any longer, but you can still see Eddie in the shot with Buck. So it's almost like it's about Eddie.
It's almost like Tommy might have been his first, but won't be his last.
So when they get to the game, when Chimney and Buck get to the game, they're just watching for a little bit before Tommy and Eddie notice them. Tommy scores not a goal. Is it a goal? Scores a shot? Scores some points?
I think it's a shot.
I don't do sports ball. Okay, I'm so sorry. Tommy gets the ball in the hoop.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And Eddie goes, hey, that's my boy. Which I can't believe I didn't trigger Buck into an immediate rage.
I mean, he witnessed it. Close to snapping.
They notice them, and then Eddie goes, how did you talk him into this, Buck? He always says no to me. And Chimney's like, I have my ways. And then as soon as Tommy and Eddie walk away, Chimney's like, so I'm your basketball beard. I feel so bonded. They literally used the word beard.
Which is queer coding.
Which is 100% queer coding. I mentioned it earlier in the episode we were talking about Glee and how Karofsky and Santana were each other's beards, you know?
Yeah.
Basketball beard. It's the word beard. That's insane work.
Can't believe. No, I totally can't believe that Chimney was just like, you're gay.
Yeah, because Chimney talks to Hen.
And Maddie.
And Hen was like, you're gay. And Chimney talks to Maddie exactly so.
Yeah.
And Maddie's just like, did you hear about Buck's new crush?
Oh my God.
Probably.
I mean,
she needs an outlet.
Probably do talk a lot, extensively about whatever the fuck Buck is doing in these situations.
So we're moving on to the scene at Dispatch, and just want to highlight how Buck is talking about how he was pissed off, and seeing Eddie with Tommy, like seeing them being such good friends after only 2 weeks. It was 2 days for you guys. Calm down. He felt left out, and he was just trying to get his attention. He literally says, I was trying to get Eddie's attention.
Yeah, so like here he knew whose attention he wanted. And then, I mean, I know this is skipping around, but like, you know, going to that end there.
In that conversation with Tommy, he just conflates the feelings and is like, well, it must have been this. So again, another example where Tommy is just, he's only part of the conversation so much, and how his friendship with Eddie has made him jealous of how much time Eddie is spending with him, how he felt like he's getting replaced, basically. So then at the loft, my goodness, what a weird scene. So Tommy shows up, Buck offers him a beer, and Tommy says, no, I'm good. I won't stay long.
Yeah, it's saying in the text that Tommy is just there for a little while. Like, I won't stay long. Like, you can extrapolate it and show, like, you know, the writer's intentions for the character, and just like, I won't stay long, but I'm going to help you along with this certain thing, and then bye, because that's what a plot device does.
And Tommy says later, obviously I've been the cause of some bad blood between you and Eddie, and I just want you to know that was never my intention.
Yeah.
We've talked about this before. We'll probably talk about it again when we get into the love triangle thing, but he was literally put here to get in between them and cause bad blood. To cause an explosion in emotion and jealousy.
Yeah, I mean, it's right there in the text, really blatant.
Yeah, I think there can be a difference between what a character's actual intentions in their world are and the intentions of, like, from a meta-analysis, like the intentions of the writers and the showrunners and everything like that. So, like, Tommy as a character, of course, that was not his intention. Tommy as a plot device inserted into this narrative by the writers and the showrunners, that intention was to literally get in between Buck and Eddie.
Because no one really has before.
Exactly.
The other love interests never have, and it's what they all have in common.
They've never been a threat to the other.
Because they were female?
And because I don't think they have like the shared life or the shared employment experience.
Yeah.
And most of them also don't start out as friends. They are specifically introduced as love interests. So to have Tommy be introduced as a friend first and turn into a love interest because that's what benefits the plot, I think that is also the difference, right? Because even Taylor, you can't really say, like, even though she was introduced before she became a love interest, she was still like mildly antagonistic towards Buck, and it wasn't like a friendship that was developed there. And Eddie never develops friendships with his love interests at all. So that role as that very equal partnership, shared life experience, shared values have always been filled by either Buck or Eddie for one or the other. So to have Tommy actively plopped in here and kind of like rustle that up a little bit, you know, shake it up, that is the difference. And that's why it propels the story in the way that it does.
Tommy later says, I mean, it's not like I could ever replace you. What did we say at the beginning of the episode? Device characters
Can be replaced.
very easily. Who can't be replaced? A main character.
Yeah. It's interesting, though, too, for Tommy to say, it's not like I could ever replace you, because Tommy has been replaced by Buck. So it's not that Tommy could ever replace Buck, because Buck replaced Tommy.
Oh my God, that's so funny.
So like literally, it's this whole conversation is talking on a meta level about the intentions of what they're going to be doing with this character. That he's not going to be there for a long time, that he is purely to drive tension in between Buck and Eddie, and to show that Tommy cannot replace anyone because he is the replaceable character.
Buck says, I can get pretty jealous. Yeah, we know. You maimed your best friend. He says this later. He's talking about like how he thought Tommy was cool and like wanted to get to know him. And then you left with Eddie, which listen, you don't have to tell me how great Eddie is. You know, I've known that since the first day I worked with him. Of course you want to hang out with Eddie. Plus, well, I don't know Muay Thai. And then again, I could teach you. This is where his wires get crossed because it's like, I don't know, the fourth time Tommy in this episode has said something about like teaching him. So then Buck is like, is that going to be after our flying lessons? And this is when like there's tension happening now, probably on the same day. Tommy says, and then Buck's like, good, trying to get your attention has been kind of exhausting. And Tommy very confusedly is like, my attention?
Yeah, that's one of the wildest things I think they could have done, because that really does emphasize how Buck has conflated his feelings of Eddie onto a very established as similar character.
Then Buck says the like standard Buck and Eddie line, which is, yeah, I guess so. Romantic.
So sure. Oh, I'm so sure. Buck.
Yeah, he sounds so sure. Yeah, I guess so. And he looks confused while he says it.
Because he is confused.
He is confused.
He wouldn't look this confused if it was actually what...
But this is how he's like explaining it to himself. He's like, I mean, I did maim my best friend. He's like, well, if I hurt Eddie, I must have been trying. Like he's trying to make it make sense in his head. And he just puts that beautiful mind task and comes to the wrong conclusion.
How do you get here?
He was literally just telling Maddie he was trying to get Eddie's attention.
I know, that's exactly what I'm saying. Like, how do you get from there to here?
You jump a couple hurdles.
I don't know.
Well, those are some really big fucking hurdles. Those hurdles
Have you
are
seen
like
his
40
legs?
feet.
He can clear those no problem. That's why we're in this. That's why we're here in this dilemma.
Stop. Just a line to keep in mind for the very end of this episode. Tommy says, crosstown traffic, I came in a car this time.
Interesting.
I don't get it because he's never been to Buck's place. But anyway, I don't know what this time means. But he took a car to Buck's place and he's mentioning it. It's going to mirror the end. As Tommy's leaving, he's like, and for God's sake, please call Eddie, which parallels Eddie in 705, telling Buck to call Tommy.
I was just reading through this insane dialogue.
Yeah.
It is
This
insane.
is why I was going insane last night, guys.
Yeah.
None of this is even the full dialogue.
All right, so 705, you don't know me. Tommy is basically like a plot device for Buck.
Me and Buck.
I was just about to do that.
I can't say his name anymore. Like a normal person. Buck. Anyway. So anyway, he's a plot device for Buck to come out to Eddie and Maddie and show that Buck has some feelings he doesn't understand about Eddie.
So at the restaurant, help,
I'm still at the restaurant. Still.
The blocking at the restaurant is where we get our triangle of the episode. There's always a triangle. Well, when Tommy's actually there, there's a triangle. It's when Eddie and Marisol come up to Buck and Tommy's table, And it's only at like the very beginning and end of their conversation. There's a wide shot at the beginning and a wide shot at the end. And they both show Eddie and Marisol on the left, but Marisol's kind of like tucked to the side. So it's like she's there, but she's so small and kind of tucked away. And then Buck is in the middle, always looking at Eddie, I think, except for the comment Tommy makes about, right, Evan? And then Tommy's on the right.
So remind me.
Yes.
Oh no, that would disprove my argument, I guess. Because I was gonna be like, because I before we got on, we were talking about what does the left, what does the right mean, and I was like, so does that mean that the left is like what the center person can't have? Because it would make sense here. It would make sense after they rescue Bobby and Athena, because like we're behind that theory of like Tommy wanting Eddie. But then it doesn't, unless like we can figure out how this works at Harbor,
No, it makes sense because Eddie's on the left.
Yeah, multiple times.
Eddie's on the left. I think the only time it doesn't make sense is when you're doing multiple angle shots.
Yeah.
Or actually, maybe I guess it does make sense at the basketball game because you do have the first shot of the three of them is with Tommy on the left. But then the second one is with Eddie on the left. So that's again the foreshadowing of like, thinks he wants Tommy, but then it ends up being Eddie.
Okay, because they put both.
You cracked it.
Hey,
you figured it out.
Let's go.
So it's what we're theorizing is like what he thinks he can't have on the left.
Yeah.
Whoever is in the center, no matter like what the feeling is that they're having in the center, the person on the left is who they can't have.
So there was like some interview that I watched, like, I don't know, several weeks ago where they were talking about like staging for like, play productions.
Oh.
And so they were talking about how like the villain or, the enemy comes in, enters stage left, and then, the hero enters stage right. So, you have that good versus evil type of thing. But in this case, like, when we're saying that Eddie or whoever is on the left is someone that they can't have. It's like, like they can't, like, it's not, I guess, maybe I'm now just making shit up.
No, because it's different. It has to translate differently because like you can have 360 option of angles, right? In TV and film. Whereas like when you're looking at a stage, you got left, right, and center. And the people can't,
The language has to be a little different, but you can have translations of it. Because with stage, you're only looking at it from the front. Like as an audience member, you're only looking at it from the front. And with TV, you have like multiple camera angles. So like, but those are still very intentional. So I think that's a really interesting thing to bring up because there's so much intentional, like triangular shaped blocking here, but it continues to be like specific people on the left. And depending on who's in the middle and stuff like that. You cracked it.
Yay.
Yeah. So then at the ending, then because we keep talking about too, how like sometimes or a lot of the time, there's three of them and then someone leaves or the next shot is the same angle, but someone else is not there and two of them are left. So at the end of this conversation, Eddie and Marisol leave the frame, but they walk across the whole frame and leave to the right. And normally, the person leaving the frame is Tommy. This is the only one that I can remember off the top of my head it actually being Eddie leaving. And I paused, played every single frame. Eddie is still in that frame. A little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. So you can't directly see him, but he is still there.
I am also here.
He is still there.
Yeah, but it's interesting that it's not Tommy that leaves in that instance because he does leave the date. So like, essentially he is leaving.
Yeah.
Just a little later.
So, I mean, the greatest hits of this one, I guess, is Eddie saying, guess you can never have enough closet space.
Oh my God. You can't say that.
Just, oh my God. Oh my God.
On so many levels.
And then Buck going, oh yeah, you too, bro. He has never called Eddie bro. I think he called him brother once. I think they've both each called each other brother once. When it's like, you could have my back any day, brother. And then in season 2, when Buck is, or they're both in season 2. Later in season 2, when they're at the fountain, and he's like, you said it, brother.
Yeah, that's it.
That's it. So he's like, yeah, you too, bro.
That sounds intentional. Sounds very intentional. They're probably like, oh yeah, all these Buck and Eddie fan, so maybe let's not.
It's that thing where you're overcorrecting, right? Where it's like if he's having these confusing feelings about Eddie, he's not only overcorrecting because he's on a date with a man and he doesn't even understand his sexuality yet. He hasn't talked to Eddie about it. And this is Eddie's friend. So he's really nervous, but also I think it kind of comes down to like being anxious about his like weird feelings about Eddie in this whole thing. So he overcorrects. It's like, bro.
Yeah, it's an overcorrection, overcompensation for like everything, not for himself, like trying to figure himself out, or not being able to be himself and upfront with Eddie in the first place. It's the confusion, again, circling around Buck's own self that Tommy has just brought to the surface. That's it.
And then as Tommy and Buck are leaving the restaurant, when the Uber pulls up, Buck goes, wow, or he's saying like, wow, that's so many choices like about the movie theater. And then when the Uber pulls up, he's like, hey, is this ours? Is this ours? And Tommy goes, no, it's mine. I think I'm going to skip the movie. So again, we have that's so many choices because Buck is having to make choices that I don't think he's even willing to look at.
No.
Then he's like, oh, this is our vehicle to leave here together. And Tommy's like, nope, it's mine. In a getaway car. And he says, I think you're adorable. I don't think you're ready. I'll see you around. And just keep all that in mind for 8:06 when we get there. So later at Maddie's, he's really concerned. Not because, well, I mean, he is kind of concerned about how he acted when he was, I'm an ally, whatever. But he was more so concerned because he lied to his best friend. So he says it's tearing him up inside. And he's like, who I was on a date with isn't the point. They don't matter. The point is I lied to my best friend's face. So again, he is a plot device here for this turmoil of more confusion of the feelings about Eddie.
And I would just like to point out here with Buck saying who I was on a date with shouldn't matter. Like the pronouns shouldn't matter. Anything like that. Oliver Stark has said in multiple interviews that, it's important to keep in mind and to note that like Buck's sexuality is not tied to any particular character other than Buck. So on a meta level here, it really doesn't matter who he was on a date with.
No.
Because this still revolves around Eddie.
Yeah. And it's not even about the date. It's about lying to his best friend and feeling shitty about that.
Yeah, it's not even about his sexuality. It's about lying to his best friend.
It's not until it is because he says the male pronoun, and then it becomes, we get back to the pronoun. It's Buck brings up, I didn't even make it to the movie. Again, we'll talk about that in 8:06. And then Buck says, with Tommy, I don't know. He's so confident, he's interesting. He has a cleft. He says this after he's talking about how he's always been interested in women. But with Tommy, so these are the things that he lists that he likes about Tommy. And those traits are he's confident, he's interesting, and he has a cleft chin. What?
This is part of the thing. These are all things that are so generic.
Yep.
And doesn't actually have anything to do with Tommy as an individual, like a fully fleshed individual within the world of 911. And besides the cleft chin, he says cleft. I think he means cleft chin, which is a physical attribute, first of all. So 1 out of the 3 is just a physical thing, which I mean, physical attraction is important to some people. But the other part about being confident and interesting are also aligned with Eddie from the very beginning.
Oh, yeah.
And we've talked about that from like the season 2, episode 1, about how competent Eddie is and like the confidence that he exudes, even if he isn't all the time, and how interesting he is because Eddie was introduced with, like, oh, he has a silver star. He was at the top of his class in the academy, like all of these interesting things about him. So basically, besides the one physical trait that Buck lists, both of those other things are things that can also describe Eddie. And it's just, Tommy is such a blank slate that they're just throwing all of this Eddie stuff onto him and making it seem like Buck was interested romantically in him.
And it's also just very generic, like, it's so plot device to be like, what do you like about this person? And it's like, they're interesting and confident and they're attractive. Like,
Yeah.
it's just so surface level.
They're good looking and they're cool.
In an interview with Max Gao from The Hollywood Reporter, titled 911 Boss, Exploring Buck's New Sexuality Awakening, felt like it was the right time. So Tim Minear says, we're constantly considering what all the options are for all the characters, but it really felt like, no, this is Buck's story. But really, he's questioning everything. I just knew that I needed a scene with Maddie and I needed a scene with Eddie. Those two things were important. So strategically, I wanted to get Tommy out of the picture for the bulk of the episode so that Buck could deal with the other people in his life and circle back around to that moment at the end of the episode where he sits down with Tommy and says, you said I wasn't ready. I don't know what I'm ready for, but I'm ready for something. I'm just not sure what that is yet. I think Eddie is a little taken aback because he's so in his own head. He's dealing with his own stuff. If you look at the way that scene is constructed, we really are coming into it with Eddie just being completely distracted by whatever is going on in his own life. And then once Buck gets his attention, he gives Buck his attention, and it takes a second. Did we want to comment on that or no?
Sure, I'll comment on it. That to have Tim say, first of all, he needed to get Tommy out of the way, out of the picture for most of the episode, so Buck could deal with the other people in his life, meaning Maddie and Eddie, and coming out to them. You wouldn't have to get rid of someone for a good chunk of the episode if they were not like obsolete in essence, right? To their story.
Right. It's kind of basically saying like his relationship with Tommy isn't the centerfold. It's his sexuality. Right. So, and how he wants to, begins to explain it or come out to Eddie and Maddie.
Mm-hmm. The two most important people in his life.
Yeah.
Yes. And then for Tim to go on and say, like Eddie's just been distracted with whatever's going on in his life, meaning like all of the Marisol stuff and that drama. And then it's like once Buck gets Eddie's attention and Eddie gives Buck his attention, so that it just takes a second. It's Tim confirming, or I'm interpreting it, and I think I can speak for us here, that we are interpreting this as essentially confirmation that Buck is still so confused and he really did want Eddie's attention. That is so purposeful with the wording that he says there. He would not say Eddie gives Buck his attention, and once he gets it, that indicates to me that is actually what Buck has been like trying to achieve, like the whole last episode, was for Eddie to pay attention to him. But Eddie's been so distracted with Tommy, with Marisol, with all of this other stuff. And it's just like, why would he say that specifically if not, Tommy's attention doesn't matter? It's all about Eddie for Buck.
Then Max Gao proceeds to ask Tim Minear about Tommy and Marisol and if we're going to see them in the back half of the season and if they're going to stick around into the next season. And Tim Minear says they're going to stick around to whatever degree they're going to stick around. What
a bitchy thing to say.
And I'm going to continue to say, guys, Tim Minear told you.
He's
These
been
are
telling
plot
you,
devices.
and the story has been telling you.
Yeah.
So
I wish I had seen this quote a long time ago. I mean, I don't read I don't read press stuff like to the degree that Rachel does, and I probably should. But
I'll tell you.
But yeah, and that's the other thing. Rachel will tell us. Rachel will give us a Cliff Notes version, or I just see what Twitter's like highlights. But I mean, there's some things that I feel like Twitter specifically kind of skips over or just doesn't really think about it too much. And I'm just sitting here, I'm like, guys, where was this? I didn't see this on my timeline.
Yeah. I mean, on one level, you can say that is a very just like general PR answer. Like, I can't tell you anything. So they're just going to be here until they're not, because he can't actually say anything. But that realistically, that's kind of a very sassy way to
Yeah.
phrase like that kind of PR answer. It's like
Mhm.
they're just gonna, he was literally saying like they're gonna be here until they're not, until I decide they're not. But until he decides they're not, that also means that the writer's room are not giving, I mean, we haven't even talked about Marisol, but like Tommy and in essence Marisol, because this question is about
Talk
both
about
of them.
what about Marisol?
I know. But yeah, it's like, it's indicative that the writer's room does not have any real deep, long-lasting plans for the development of these characters. They're just there. That's what he said.
That's
They're
what
gonna
it
stick
sounds like. They're
around.
just there until they're not going to be there.
Yeah.
Because the plan is for them not to be once they have served their purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's an
Mhm.
implied they
Mhm.
will be gone, but they're just
Mhm.
here until
For now.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's literally from the horse's mouth. It's from the boss guy. What more do you want? And yes, you can say, like, to be devil's advocate, you can say, yes, this was while the season was airing. Yes, they had not finished writing all of the episodes of the season. They hadn't at this point even, I think, like, started blocking out season 8 yet, even though they had been renewed. But like, you can still have plans in place, like general plans in place, and know like a general sense of where they're going with some of these characters. They just don't know exactly the
You
actual
could have just been like, we'll
timeline of
see.
it. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
that
we'll
would have been
see
the
where it
PR
goes.
answer.
Mhm.
They don't know.
But it's just like, they'll be there as much as they'll be there. Anyway, at Buck's loft, when Eddie comes over to talk about his own problems, Buck finally gets his attention after Eddie says, you and Tommy have the right idea. Stay single. Hang out with the boys. Hang out with the boys.
Is that what they're calling it nowadays?
And then Buck says it was a date. That takes Eddie a beat, and he's like, this is his response. Wait, Tommy's gay? That was your takeaway. That was your takeaway from this. Because Tommy is a foil for Eddie. And Eddie has all these things in common with him. And Eddie has all these preconceived notions of, well, we do all these things that are super hyper masculine. And like, I've never gotten that vibe from him. Like, how could he, like, if we are so similar, how is he gay? And it's never come up. Yeah, that too. I don't even want to get into that line, actually, because it has nothing to do with the plot device. It's just a ridiculous line. Buck tells him how he messed up their date, right? And I think this is an important line to point out, because Tommy and none of the other love interests of Buck's have ever given him, like especially Abby, who is also a parallels Tommy a lot, have never given him his own autonomy to choose what he wants to do in the relationship. The decision's always made for him. So on the date, Tommy made the decision that Buck wasn't ready. When Buck tells Eddie this, Eddie goes, what do you think? Wow, so easy. What do you think about your own readiness and your own feelings and mental, but crazy. And that's a great, it is. Yeah, this is like a great comparison of like the plot device character not giving him any autonomy. It's again serving as, I mean, this is probably the first time, I think in season 8, we see direct comparisons where like showing the difference in how Tommy and Eddie treat Buck. So this might be the first best example of that, where Eddie is like, even though he's not the one in this non-relationship with Tommy, he is trying to get Buck to like embrace his own autonomy and the choice of what he thinks he is ready for.
Yeah.
And then Buck says he can't stop thinking about him. And Eddie says, well, you know what? I think you should call him. Buck is anxious that like, what if he says no? Like, what if I call him and he doesn't like want to try again with me? And then Eddie says, well, then he's an idiot. Don't walk away from something before you even know what it is. And Buck says that sounds like some good advice. So they both just gave each other terrible advice. But at least
out of context, it's good advice. But
out
in
of
the
context, it's good
like,
advice. But yeah, I don't know. He tells him to call Tommy again. But I don't think this is conjecture. I don't think that Buck would have called Tommy if Eddie hadn't told him to.
I think that's fair.
Yeah.
Because to me, it sounds like, well, like, Buck at the time, he was kind of like, well, I already fucked that up. So, like, I feel like he was just going to forget about it.
Yeah.
And move on.
Mm-hmm.
But when he says he can't stop thinking about Tommy, I'm just like, he can't stop thinking about, like, his sexuality and, like, what it is. Because he still hasn't figured it out yet.
Yeah. And that's the thing. When by Buck saying, like, he can't stop thinking about Tommy is the embodiment of this new aspect of Buck's sexuality. And it's not actually about, again, I'm getting repetitive, but it's not actually about Tommy. It is about Buck and exploring this new aspect of himself that he has yet to explore. You could replace Tommy with any other character and it would be the same. Like, Buck would still be thinking about insert whatever.
Yes. About any random dude he kissed, because he would be thinking about all of the feelings that led to the kiss and, like, why, like, he has not figured it out. This is the one time in his life that he has not done a fucking Wikipedia search.
It's his radical acceptance. Woo! I kiss my no.
So then later at the cafe, Buck says to Tommy, seems there are a lot of things we don't know about each other. And Tommy says, practically everything.
Wow, we could have told you that.
And guess what? This never changes. This never changes.
It doesn't.
I mean, it's not crazy because it's like he was there for a purpose and he served the purpose, but it's like we were never going to really get to know more about Tommy. So
in essence, Buck was never going to get to know more about Tommy.
But the fact that Tommy never gets to know anything about Buck,
that's the wild part.
Just like the basic that he doesn't even like basketball. Crazy.
Yeah.
And then Buck says this whole thing about, like, I don't know what I'm ready for, but I am ready for something. Don't think that necessarily means that, like, he's like, and I think that could be with you. Again, it's, I think. He doesn't, he's not super sure that, like, all these feelings are about Tommy, but he wants to try. And Tommy is the person who he's decided the feelings are about.
It's all projecting.
Yeah.
So he's exploring these new kinds of feelings onto Tommy, and it's not about Tommy because he doesn't know anything of true value about Tommy. It's all, the only things that he knows about Tommy are what he has in common with Eddie and what Buck feels. He realizes that he is attracted to Tommy in some way, shape, or form. It's just projection.
Yeah. Honestly, you could change the word you and just put with a man or with a guy or whatever. Basically what you said, Rachel. It's not about him. It's not about Tommy.
A lot of this episode is just like really hammering home that Tommy isn't that important.
Tommy's a tool.
He is a tool because he's a device. He's a plot device. He's a tool.
And he also is a tool because he doesn't get to know his boyfriend.
Yeah. After 6 fucking months, Jesus Christ.
Yikes.
Anyway, I think that we should move on to season 7, episode 6. There Goes the Groom.
Okay, so Tommy is a plot device here just to outbuck to everyone but Eddie and Maddie and showcase Eddie's jealousy.
Jealousy. Siri playing Jealousy by Olivia Rodrigo.
So we're back in the blocking building again at the karaoke bar. One of my favorites. This was the first episode we watched live, so it has a special place in my heart. So we have 2 points of view for this blocking. We have Buck's point of view and Eddie's point of view, and they're over each of their shoulders. So when we're looking over Buck's shoulder from his point of view, Buck is on the left, Eddie is in the middle, Tommy's on the right. And then from Eddie's point of view over his shoulder, Tommy's on the left, Buck is in the middle, and Eddie's on the right. So, God, so you cracked this so well.
Yeah.
So Eddie in the middle thinks he can't have Buck.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And then Buck in the middle thinks he can't have Tommy
for the night because he's leaving.
There you go.
Or actually, that's Eddie's point of view. So if Eddie's looking at it and he's like, Buck can't have Tommy, or he doesn't want him to be with Tommy. Maybe
Either.
that's the read. I mean, that's the read from how he acts.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't want him to be with Tommy. And he's like, it's so weird because he just goes from like, hey man, to like, I hate everything about this. Like immediately.
But then, so going back to my whole point about theater and the whatever and the staging. So like Eddie at this point is just an audience member because all of this applies to the audience member observing what the ever the hell is happening. So in theory, technically Tommy's on the left and Buck is on the right.
But I see it from their point of view. Like whenever we do an over the shoulder shot, I see it as a point of view from whoever's shoulder we're looking over. That's how I understand over the shoulder shots to be.
Well, if we're going with my theory, back to that whole left versus right thing, I know what I said about the whole, like, maybe that's something that the other character can't have. Let's change that connotation of can't, more like shouldn't. For, you know what I mean?
That can work too.
Can't / shouldn't.
Yeah.
That works too. Oh, your brain.
Sometimes it works.
Mood.
I just remember Rachel asking me, what brain?
That wasn't at you.
I know. I'm pulling your leg.
Okay.
So once Hen and Karen arrive to interrupt whatever weird fucking scene this was, Eddie and Buck are left alone in the frame with Buck in the foreground and Eddie kind of behind him.
Who's on which side?
There's not really sides.
Yeah, on this one it's gonna be hard.
Eddie's kind of directly behind him.
Equal partnership.
Well, I kind of looked at it as like Buck is in the foreground of his sexual realization and Eddie's far behind him. Out of focus.
That I think gets like reiterated with that kind of
with couch stuff. Listen to Couch Theory, fam.
And other stuff. Yeah. I think we see that kind of blocking as well, where Eddie is just kind of like behind. And that can be like, you know, he has Buck's back sort of thing, but it's also, you know, this extra level layer.
So with remembering the context that we said, the purpose of the plot device, Tommy, in this episode, one of the big ones is to showcase Eddie's jealousy. So with that in mind, one of you read these bold quotes, por favor.
So once Tommy has already arrived, Eddie says, hey, I didn't know you could bring a date to a bachelor party. Very sassy. And then offers Tommy a drink. And Tommy says that he would just take an orange juice because he's on standby for work. And we can't get into this right now, but juice theory is a thing.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's one of the reasons I highlighted this. But also, I'm on standby.
Oh, I was like, juice.
That he specifically asks for the juice.
Yeah.
Because he wants it and he has it.
And he feels like he can.
Fuck is the juice. And then he feels like he can. Like he's entitled to it. Maybe. Ooh.
Anyway, we'll put a pin in that for whatever that is. Theory. Juice theory.
But yes, on standby.
Yeah, you really are, man. You really are.
Yeah. Meaning he's just there for now. And he can get called back at any time. Right? So
I think it's worth mentioning that in this scene, Buck and Eddie are wearing a couple's costume that Eddie chose.
They sure are.
They're wearing a couple's costume. So Tommy is the odd man out in that context. And he incorrectly guesses like what they are. And then once he's told what they are, he goes, which one's Crockett? As in, which one's the gay one?
Yeah, from Crockett and Tubbs in Miami Vice. And Crockett has always been the very queer-coded character. And don't they both like kind of...
They both think they're Crockett.
Yeah.
Buck is actually Crockett. But the fact that Eddie keeps saying and insisting he's Crockett makes me absolutely feral.
Because it's Eddie's idea. So you would think that he would know the difference, right?
I think he suggested it because Buck really likes the show.
Yeah.
Like, that's my headcanon. And he doesn't really understand the queer coding of it. But, lol.
But he is actually dressed like Tubbs.
Yes.
And not Crockett. So, different conversation.
Just for Tommy to show up to the bachelor party. And the only people there are the guy he's on a date with, dating, I don't know, on a date with. We'll say that. They aren't dating yet. And one of his new good friends, Eddie. And then immediately, his new friend, Eddie, who's normally super chill, fun, good times, is all of a sudden aggro out of fucking nowhere.
Like icy.
Mm-hmm. Very sassy, very snide.
The face.
And then he's wearing a couple's costume the guy he's on a date with.
Yeah.
I would have left.
Oh, honestly, very messy, Eddie.
So messy.
Oh, he's
All of
so
us
messy.
was so messy.
No, I don't know if this has any place in this episode per se, but like the whole when Buck is coming out to Eddie and Eddie's like, this doesn't change a thing between us.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't change a thing between Buck and Eddie, but it changes everything between Tommy and Eddie once he knows.
Never hear about them hanging out doing things again, do we?
Which is real interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that actually goes in this episode or not, but I just wanted to point it out.
Almost like they were only friends to further the plot for Buck.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Ah, interesting.
Once we're done with the bachelor party and it ends up being like the actual hospital wedding.
Meh.
Another conversation. We get into like the reason why Tommy is a plot device in this episode.
The second reason.
Or the second besides, inciting some jealousy in Eddie, which is just real funny that like both Buck and Eddie are real jealous over Tommy. Yeah, I'm so sure. Not like Tommy is, stand-in for either character at any point, it was crazy stuff. So the secondary reason that Tommy is a plot device in this episode is so Buck can be out to the rest of his friends and family besides the two people that already know.
Mm-hmm.
So when Tommy shows up at the hospital and, Buck goes to greet him, then they kiss. And because Tommy just came back from a fire, he has like soot all over his face. So then he gets it like all over Buck's face and then doesn't say anything because it's all over Buck's face. And Buck just goes like,
because it's for the plot.
Yeah. Looking like the cat that got the cream. Did not mean that in any particular way besides the metaphor. So just like returning back to the friends and family with all of the soot over his face. And it's basically just does the job of outing Buck or him allowing himself to be out with everyone else because people can put 2 and 2 together and be like, oh, here's this really, sooty guy, firefighter who came. Who is he? Because Ravi didn't know. And then Buck, who is also strangely sooty, but only on the lower half of his face. So then everyone is just like, oh, 2 + 2 = 4.
Mm-hmm.
There is no scene of really introducing everybody to Tommy as, the guy he's seeing.
Because he's serving his purpose.
Yeah.
Just by giving context of why there's soot all over Buck's mouth. That's literally why he's there.
Yeah. And the context for that is, oh, Buck is now dating a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very Buck thing to do for him just to like make this, sweeping, not even announcement, just kind of like, I am also here.
I'm also queer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Oliver Stark, for the joke because it's never going to die.
I gotta start giving him royalties
I
or
know.
something.
That has become like everyday vernacular. I'm also here.
I love it. As a Cancer, it's just the best, honestly.
Anytime we're feeling our Tinkerbelliest.
Tommy apologized for missing the ceremony, and Chim's like, thanks. Looks like you were busy. And then Hen and Karen are like, just the faces they make are the best. And Hen says, well, it's about damn time.
Also
Of course,
crazy.
she clocked it.
Yeah.
Before now that Buck is by.
Mm-hmm.
I just want to talk really briefly about the blocking here. We don't quite get a triangle, but we get an interesting close-up pan situation. So Tommy is on the left and Buck is on the right for when they like show up to the hospital room. But you don't see them both in the same shot right away. You see a close-up of Tommy, and then it pans to a close-up of Buck, showing the soot on his face. And then he cuts Chim, cuts to Hen and Karen, and then finally there's a shot of both of them before panning to Buck as he moves, and then Eddie is there. And Eddie's smiling at him.
Interesting stuff.
Super interesting, intentional stuff. I'm sure it means absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Yay.
So in 709 Ashes, the main role of Tommy in this episode is to be utilized to help convince Bobby that Buck is doing well and taken care of, because Bobby is like, you know, on his retirement era sort
His
of thing.
farewell tour.
Yeah.
His,
Yeah, Bobby's on his grand farewell
1 degree
tour.
left of suicidal ideation.
Yes, pretty much.
Getting your affairs in order.
Uh-huh. So kind of for Bobby to, you know, ensure that Buck is doing well and Buck is happy. Again, it all revolves around Buck and his feelings and not necessarily Tommy.
He doesn't give a shit.
Individually. This is also like the only time that Buck and Bobby speak about Buck's new relationship with Tommy, because Buck even says, like, I know we haven't really talked about him. And Bobby says, well, what's there to talk about? So, and he's like, yeah, Tommy's good people. He's good for you. And Buck's all like, how do you know that? And Bobby says, because we haven't had to talk about it, which is kind of completely counterintuitive to the whole thing, because if it was an actually good, beneficial relationship, Buck would be screaming to the rooftop.
Wouldn't Buck, who can't shut the fuck up about things that he's happy about?
Yeah. And it's like, they wouldn't necessarily have to talk about, like, you know, the issues of the relationship if it's so great, but you would talk about it.
Period at all.
At some point. So just another instance of showing that, like, yeah, they don't have to talk about it because Tommy, in the grand scheme of things, doesn't really matter that much. And that conversation is mainly about Bobby making sure that Buck is happy as he's doing his grand farewell tour. So we see Tommy with like the medal ceremony, but that's pretty much it. He's there because he's there because
he was also there.
He was also there with the saving Bobby and Athena, and he was only there because he knew how to fly plane. So
he's there.
So that brings us to the season finale of 7, which is All Fall Down, episode 10. And basically, Tommy's main purpose in this episode is to showcase how the 118 is Buck's found family, and specifically, like, Bobby is his father figure with the 118, and how it was never as tight-knit and cohesive when Tommy was around. So this harkens back to what we were talking about with Bobby Begins Again, where, you know, it was just co-workers until Buck showed up and literally replaced Tommy. So this kind of means that, like, Buck as Tommy's literal replacement was the missing piece the 118 needed, and the 118 was the missing piece for Buck in return. That's it.
That's it.
Like, I'm sorry. That's just kind of it. It's kind of another instance that we're seeing trickle in a little more in the second half of season 7 that will roll into 8, like showcasing how Tommy doesn't belong in Buck's world because he's just a plot device. He's just there to emphasize other things about Buck or Eddie. So
facts.
Yeah. I don't know how else to say that. Like, when they're talking and they're having dinner together while Bobby's in the hospital, and Buck's saying, you know, like, Bobby's like the father I never had, and he means that much to me. And Tommy is just like, I'm just a little bit jealous. It wasn't like this when I was at the 118 and I had Gerard, which didn't make me a better person. But Captain Gerard was like having the dad I already had. So that's, I think, the most backstory we actually get about Tommy, like Tommy's inner world. Everything we learn about Tommy is stuff he likes or things that are similar to Eddie. This is the only instance we get of like an actual why he is the way he is. And it's relating Captain Gerard to his real dad, which is so sad.
I mean, what if I told you that was still parallel to Eddie?
It is.
So it's not just about him.
It's still not just about Tommy. Eddie. Yeah, because you can say that a lot of that, you know, performative masculinity stuff still relates to Eddie.
And his terrible father. Yeah.
Even the like crumb that we get of an like inner world at all. It's like a piece of sand. It's like grain of sand. It still can be drawn back to Eddie or Buck being, you know, like the 118 is Buck's family, but it wasn't Tommy's
That's all she wrote.
For season 7, at least.
Now for season 8. Oh, man. There's not a lot to talk about in episode 1 of season 8, Buzzkill. He's literally just there to show how Buck is at home in the Diaz home. And Tommy does not belong there.
No. And he's just there to eat cupcakes.
He is, again, just there. He seems out of place, especially when they're on the video call and he just kind of like walks away once it starts going bad and starts eating cupcakes or whatever. But the blocking is Eddie is shown between Buck and Tommy. Buck is on the left and Eddie's in the center. Tommy's on the right, which falls in with our person in the middle can't have thing on the left. And it's the first time we see Eddie in the center
In the middle.
being like, I can't have Buck. Interesting.
Mm.
First episode of season 8. I see you.
See me, Norman.
Jesus Christ. That's all I got for that episode, fam.
So you want to go?
So, episode 5 of season 8, Masks, Mr. Plot Device.
No, how have we not done that the whole time?
I don't
That's
know.
fantastic.
So, Mr. Plot Device is here to show the difference between how he and Eddie treat Buck and how Buck responds to both of them, which
It's different.
I can't believe we finally got it. We got here, finally. I mean, text and on screen wise, that we finally got to the point where, hey, he's not that great.
Mm.
So, yeah. Anyway.
So there are no triangular things, but in the hospital, Eddie is shown beside in the traditional spot as the spouse or significant other, while Tommy is standing on the other side. Buck is in the middle. Buck is in the middle. Eddie's on the left.
Ooh.
There's a theme here happening. But yeah, and then Eddie translates for Buck the entire conversation. And that's really showing how Eddie can finish Buck's sentences, knows everything about him and his family because he's part of it. Sorry.
We finish each other's
sandwiches.
That's what I was going to say.
And Tommy still barely knows Buck or his life after dating him for months. Like, doesn't even know that Bobby's wife is Athena.
I know.
Like, these are basics.
6 months.
And that's ridiculous.
Ridiculous.
Oh, God. Okay. Sorry. Continue.
That's it. I don't really feel like I need to expand on that. Like, it's a stark contrast in how much they know about Buck.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Eddie's been there for years. But when you're dating someone, you're supposed to, the whole purpose of like dating before you get serious with someone is to get to know them. And he knows nothing about him. And that's made apparent. I don't know, just that center with the left.
I think this episode also does show very much kind of how we just mentioned again with 7-10, how truly Tommy does not fit in Buck's world. He doesn't have like a place. He wants to be part of his world so bad.
Don't do that reference.
So sorry, Ariel.
Yeah.
He's like, look at that stuff. Isn't it neat?
Oh my God.
And his collection isn't complete because he wants to collect both Buck and Eddie. At least he understands that they are not sold separately.
No,
so
they are a
come as a
package
set.
deal. Do not separate in your adoption of them.
Another scene that I'd like to talk about the blocking specifically is when all three of them are in Buck's loft after Buck gets all of those boils from Billy Boyles, and they call Eddie in to treat Buck, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's very interesting, too, because it's not like a straight up triangle, but it is like triangular. It's triangular because there are three people there, but it's mostly, I think what we end up seeing from kind of this point on is there's a separation, right? And Buck and Eddie are kind of on one side and Tommy is on another side. So we have Buck and Eddie on one side of Buck's table in the kitchen, and Tommy is sitting on the whole other side. So he is facing them. They're not facing him. Mostly they are looking at each other.
Mm-hmm. The previous scene is the last time they're ever all three in a shot together.
Oh, in like one frame, you mean?
Yes.
So Tommy is on like the complete other side of the table by himself, but Buck and Eddie are aligned on the other side. And when you kind of look at it, I don't know if this is exactly a shot in the episode, but there is a still shot, like a promotional still, angular setup, and it has Tommy in the middle in the background, on the other side of the table, and it has Buck on the left, and Eddie is the one on the right of the picture, treating Buck and his boils. And it does show what?
So is this like now Tommy can't have Buck? He's losing Buck. Is this how we're interpreting that? Yeah.
Yeah. So
man, I did crack it. Wow.
You really did crack it.
You did.
You
I knew there was something there, and I was like, hopefully one of us can put it together.
Still had the brain cell today. Like, dang.
I was like, I know who the center thing is about. Like, whoever center is the one who's like having the emotion, but I'm like, don't know what the who's on left and right is about. But I just thought it was super interesting that the last time we ever see all three of them in this very intentional triangular setup we've had since the first time they were all in an episode together is in the hospital room scene, where it's just shown how huge of a difference there is.
Yes.
Between how they know and treat Buck. And then in this scene, it's like Buck's all looking up at Eddie with those like doe eyes, and then whenever he looks at Tommy, it's like so I'm disgusting. Oh, so I'm gross.
Yeah. And I think that really gets underscored here with the fact that like Tommy isn't treating Buck. Eddie is treating Buck and trying to get better. So there's this like underlining sense of like tender love and care, a little bit of TLC, right? Kind of how we interpret on a more macro level how Eddie treats Buck, with a little more like understanding and love and care. And Tommy's just kind of like sitting there, not being helpful at all, but, just kind of talking about how, yeah, my cousin did this happened and it not helpful. And Buck interprets that as Tommy saying that Buck is.
I think he says, oh, so I am gross. Makes how he words that sound like there was a discussion before Eddie got there about how, oh, you couldn't even look at me like you think I'm gross.
Yeah, which is part of that whole scene when, Buck wakes up that morning and Tommy's like, and kind of like hands him the phone like he's, wouldn't touch him with a 10-foot pole. And you see that space continued, except when they're right next to each other in the hospital waiting room. But that is less of a physical distance and more of an emotional distance because Tommy's not in that group text with a 118. So it's just like, even though he's still technically there physically, I think you're right that this is the last time that we see all three of them in a shot together, like in the same frame, because in the hospital waiting room afterwards, when they're waiting for news on Denny's status, Tommy is sitting next to Buck and Eddie is across from Buck. So physically they're right next to each other. But when, Buck and Eddie and Chimney and Bobby and Athena and everyone else gets the text in their group, their family group chat, basically, and it's like ding, 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 everything's dinging. And they're all looking at each other like, oh my gosh, isn't that great news? Tommy's just kind of like looking on as an outsider. So it's that space carried over from that scene in the loft where he's on the other side of the table, but it's more of an emotional distance than a physical one. It is interesting, though, because like the way Tommy's sitting, is Buck on his right shoulder?
The hospital waiting room with everyone?
Or is Buck on his left shoulder?
Buck's on his left.
Okay. So
Buck's on his left and Tommy, I guess, would ish be in the center.
Yeah. So Buck is still on Tommy's left in this case, meaning he still wants to be part of that world. He's just not. And I guess you could extrapolate like Eddie by sitting across. He's like being more of an observer in this case. So he like had taken a closer step forward with them with taking care of Buck. But once that purpose had been filled, he took his step back again. Right. But he's still sitting directly across from Buck. Yes.
And that's shown before Tommy even gets there.
So yeah, there's more like emotional distance as opposed to physical distance that we saw earlier.
Moving along, episode 6 of season 8, Confessions. We're finally here.
Confessions.
So,
Oh,
Mr.
boy.
Redacted.
You should have been doing this the whole time.
So, Mr. Soon to be Redacted.
Mr. Bones.
Yes. Mr. Soon to be Redacted is used as a plot device to reveal this big bombshell about Abby.
Abby.
But Abby. Mr. Bones is also here to basically culminate Buck's first queer relationship, which really sets up the whole I was your first, not your last. Helps setting up Buck to learn to not judge less than noble things people have done to protect themselves. And it's also here. I mean, this whole plot device situation is also here.
The plot device of the plot device.
The plot device.
Plot deviceception.
The plot device to all plot device.
God. It's also here to reveal the Tommy and Abby parallels.
I love the way you say Abby.
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 Abby. It's reminding me of Fine.
Fine. It absolutely does. Anytime Syl says Abby or Babe, I'm just like, Fine.
Oh.
It's big Eric Matthews vibes, and I love it so much.
Well, fam, we are gathered here today, back at the restaurant, sitting in the corner, Abby haunts. Listen, this is where Tim decided to bring Tommy back and was like, this would be fucking hilarious. This is where it was going from the beginning. He had this planned the fuck out. Okay? It's so clear.
Mm-hmm.
It's calling back to dialogue. So anyway, at the restaurant, it's the same one as 705, their first date.
Imagine.
And their last. How poetic.
Their first and their last.
And they've gone nowhere is the thing. They haven't moved.
As a couple, there has been no propulsion except for on Buck's side.
Yep.
Right? That's
Yep. Just getting experience in dating someone of the same gender. So this is their 6-month anniversary. Buck didn't get him anything, which is crazy.
That seems so out of character, too.
It's so out of character. And then Tommy gives him something, which seems even more out of character because he's like canonically selfish. But then it's, he gives him Lakers tickets.
Which is a gift for himself.
And he says, take Eddie if you want. And Buck's like, really? He's like, yeah, and die. Waiter comes over after the Abby bomb is dropped, which do we need to discuss that?
It blows his mind and it blows everyone else's mind.
Exactly. They both dated Abby.
And if you'd like to see our reaction to that, watching the episode live, that is available
That's on
YouTube. And it's really funny.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bunch of screaming.
Because we had been calling it for a while and we were so excited.
Yeah.
That was a gift that Tim Minear gave specifically to us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. God bless. Anyway, the waiter comes up, says, how is everything tonight, guys? And Tommy says, perfect. Thank you.
So out of touch.
Like, I don't know how any of that was perfect.
No.
Super strange. Can I get you anything else? The waiter says, oh, no, I think we're good. Are you?
Oh, I'm so sure.
Then the waiter says, okay, who gets the damage? Tommy says, that would be him. It points to Buck.
Like, truly.
Because he's getting the damage from the plot device.
The emotional damage.
Uh-huh. Emotional damage. Emotional damage. I'm bringing that back. Anyway, then the waiter says, whenever you're ready, no rush.
That's wild. Yeah, it's crazy that Tommy is like, Buck gets the damage. Because, again, as a plot device, there's nothing that will really affect him because he's just there like as a stand-in for whatever they want him to be. So he has no like true motivation for anything other than, to be in a relationship with Buck. But like, there's nothing for him. He'll just go like, bye-bye. Mm-hmm. That's it. And that's all we'll see.
Just gonna very briefly touch on the whatever that was at dispatch. Josh says, who kissed a boy? Maddie goes, Buck. And he goes, oh, Tommy. Unless there's another boy. And Buck says, no, there's not another boy. Are you sure? Interesting
word choice.
And then my takeaway from his entire Glee speech where he tries to make Tommy sound like he was throwing the first fucking brick at Stonewall.
Oh my God. No, he really did, though. We've said it before.
Yeah. The takeaway is don't judge the people who went through battles you didn't have to, because they have scars and you honor their scars. And once again, I'm here to say this is not about Tommy. This is priming him. This whole thing, the Abby of it all, and then the Tommy of how that he was with Abby and that he was gay and knew he was gay, but was with Abby, and having to come to terms with that.
It's priming it up for Eddie's sexuality
realizing that he's gay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gay.
So that Buck has understanding going into that, instead of like reacting in a way that's like, wait, somehow you knew deep down and you still were married to Shannon. Not that he was close with Shannon and he didn't date Shannon like he did Abby, right? But I still feel like Buck would feel a certain way about that because of how strongly he feels about fairness and, treating people.
And this is basically like the culmination of why Buck is in a relationship with Tommy as a narrative plot point, right? It's to prime Buck for what will come next in multiple different ways. So this is an important part of it, because once it gets past like the shock and kind of the judgment, then there's acceptance and compassion there, right? So by him already having dealt with that with someone else, with Tommy, he can deal with that with someone else again, and coming from a place where he is already at that compassionate point, meaning with Eddie.
And then it ends where it all began, as if it never happened.
Nothing really matters.
So Tommy shows up and is like, you're not going to believe this. I got a spot right out front, meaning he drove there just like he did the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reading into that like he chose to go into this relationship.
Yes.
Right? I think we should get an Uber to the movie so I don't lose it. Once again, there's an Uber involved at the scene of the crime, and a movie that they literally never make. They've never made it to a movie.
No, they never make it to the movie. Ever, ever, ever. The only dates we've seen them on are dinner dates.
There's 2 out in public and
1 in the loft.
3 dates in 6 months. Incredible work. No wonder they know so much about each other.
Tommy really wasn't pulling out the stops for Buck like he did for Eddie.
Oh, yeah,
flying him to Vegas.
Taking him or teaching him how to fly or any of those things that he said he would do. I'll teach you Muay Thai. I'll take you on.
It's almost like he was trying to impress Eddie and realized he didn't have to impress Buck.
Interesting. Then we have Buck saying later, after he reveals that he's the himbo.
This is text from the show, not our opinion, because Buck is, I think, too smart to be a himbo.
He is way too smart. And the fact that like Tommy apologizes, like, well, if I had known, I never would have used that word. It's like, you could just like not call a stranger a himbo. Anyway.
It doesn't negate the fact that you called someone a himbo.
Exactly.
Which is not necessarily like implicitly like a bad thing, but the way that it was used in context had a less than positive connotation.
No, it was all very negative.
Yeah.
It was basically like she was spinning out, dating a man half her age, some like dumb jock guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're dating jock guy half your age. And anyway, Buck then says, what I had with her was not that. If I'm stuttering, it's because it's what's in the text for Buck.
You don't have to do the stuttering unless you want
I gotta.
to.
At least not for me. No, my relationship with Abby was the most transformative of my life until now. So, but here's the thing. It is transformative so far that he's had a low fucking bar is underground.
40 feet?
For his relationships. 40 feet underground.
Even in this episode.
Abby was the most transformative until now because it was the first real relationship he had. Right? Even though she was like not there for most of it. And then now Tommy is the most transformative recently because it's the first queer relationship he's had. So yeah, I don't know. That's just what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
Again, reiterating that like he was there to like be this catalyst,
just like Abby was.
And then she's gone. But he's not going to be haunting the narrative. Again, like we said earlier, he's already forgotten that he exists.
Yeah. Also, the way that they break up is very plot devicey. It's just kind of like a way to excuse pulling Tommy back out of the narrative. They're yoinking him back out because they're like, okay, you've served your purpose. We don't need you anymore. So we're going to have you go back to like the empty or whatever that characters hang out in. Just like a loading space, right?
Sorry, I'm just going to say he's erasing himself from the narrative.
No, he really is, though, because he is making, this is also like one of the only decisions that Tommy does make, but it's not for his character, it's for Bucks, right? He, in fact, pulls himself out of the narrative.
One that he put himself into.
Because he never belonged there to begin with.
No.
Because he was forcing himself into this. Okay, as a character, I'm not talking about like meta-analysis with the writers. Tommy himself was forcing his way into this world and he didn't fit. It was not the right puzzle piece. So then he's yoinking himself back out, does exactly what the writers intended, which was for him to just like peace out once Buck gets to a place where he feels confident and comfortable enough to kind of also the whole breakup is a plot device too, because that sends Buck from feeling comfortable and confident in his in acknowledging that an aspect of his sexuality, and as well as having a relationship that with another person that feels substantial to him, even if it's not like actually of any substance when you look at it from an outside perspective. So the breakup itself is its own plot device to get Buck to spiral. It's
to prime him to spiral.
Yeah. Or to set it up.
Another thing, yeah.
It's the MacGuffin come back again, and it's that. So there's a trope, and it's called like a closet key, and it's basically to like this archetypal character is just, as a plot device, just opens the door to the closet and lets that other character walk out, and then that plot device character just kind of like fades into the distance because he did his part. And that's all they needed him for.
He says the whole, I'm your first, not your last. No matter how much I wanted to be, I'm your first, not your last. If I stay with you, you'd break my heart. All of this is giving. He knew from the start that Buck has a thing for Eddie, and probably vice versa. And he put himself in that narrative and was like, well, I'm removing myself from this because it's not going the way that I want. Like, we picked up on it early in the season, but I really think they showed their hand with that line. With the you'll break my heart. You wouldn't mean to, but you would eventually. Anyway, we talked about that before. That's more in character analysis than what we're doing now. But
I think we talked about that a lot in our season 8 episodes 6, 7, 8. No, it's just 7 and 8.
Mostly 8.
Mostly 8. Yeah.
But yeah, so he's like, I don't think I could deal with that. I should go. And we were all like, yeah, you should.
Please.
And the writers were like, yeah, you should. You should.
Do what my dad does. It's the 8-finger brush.
Oh.
Just like, shoo, shoo, shoo.
Buck asks if he just broke up with them. And he's like, I guess I did. Believe me, I didn't see it coming either. You saw this coming. Most of us saw this coming.
We saw it coming. We saw it
coming.
He only had himself to blame.
And then we should have known that parking spot was too good to be true.
That's wild.
That is wild, actually.
I'll see you around, Buck. It's the first time he calls him Buck in the last. Yeah, it just ends right where it began. He leaves his apartment. It began with him walking into the apartment and inviting himself, and now he's showing himself out. He invited himself in, showing himself out.
Yeah, we talked about this also in our season 8, episode 7 and 8 episode, but to kind of like drive home the fact that he is a plot device, it, like you're saying, it really does end where it began, because so much of the Buck and Tommy first date and some of the stuff preceding it and the last date are exact mirrors of each other, with like the date at the same restaurant, something about a basketball game, something about Ubering to a movie and not making the movie. It's all of the same beats, if kind of mixed around a little bit, but it's essentially the same thing. So that means that there was no true development for them as a couple. The only development that we see the entire time throughout Tommy's run as Buck's love interest, because he's not a character in and of itself, the only development we see is for Buck. And you can't have a relationship with two characters mean something for two characters if one of them doesn't get developed. And Tommy never does. He's just there to propel as momentum for Buck. And sometimes Eddie. That's it.
What do we know about him that he doesn't also have in common or mirrored, foiled for Eddie?
He flies planes or helicopters. That's the only thing.
Eddie's been in a helicopter and he knows ordinances about them because he knew about the dynamic rollover.
Oh, that dynamic rollover, man. Yeah, I think that's the only thing that like really sets Tommy apart, is that he is
and
a
the
pilot.
Like sexism and homophobia, the things that existed that we knew about him before Tommy showed.
Yeah, I think he's a pilot.
Yep.
But that could have so easily been Lucy.
Been literally anyone.
Or someone, So,
which I think leads us to our last article quotes.
All right. In an interview with Tim Minear by Meredith Jacobs from TV Insider, titled 911 Boss on Tommy's Wild Revelation, Buck and Eddie Figuring Themselves Out. Insane title. Great work, Meredith.
Shout out, Meredith.
Meredith asks, we have to start with the Tommy and Abby of it all. Why? When did you come up with that?
Just why? That would be us having an interview. Just like, why?
Why did you put me through this?
If we ever get a chance to sit down with Tim Minear, it's just, why?
I feel like we would have thanked him profusely for this.
Yeah.
This is like our wish list.
Thank you, but why? All right, so Tim Minear says, we actually talked about that last year just as a fun way to complicate Buck's life, because in the pilot, she's coming off the breakup of a long-term relationship with a guy named Tommy. And I think initially it just amused us, and it was a great way to introduce a little conflict into a scene from the beginning. I love pulling from canon whenever possible. It's just like when you have all these episodes stored up, you can always go back to the pantry and see what leftovers you got to make something delicious. Which, you know what? So true, Tim. So true, Timberly. I thank you for this.
You think Tim goes on a baking spree sometimes?
Oh, with all the episodes he's got stored up in the oven? Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm just going with
literally, but I like yours better.
I don't know. I think he cooks more than he bakes.
Yeah, I want to bet Bobby's propensity for cooking is a
Tim Minear.
Probably.
Tim Minear self-insert characteristic.
Insane work. And in another interview from Jennifer Mass in Variety, titled 911 star Oliver Stark on that X twist, Tommy's choice, and why Buck went to Eddie for comfort. Jennifer asks, in this episode, the writers invoke Abby, a character that has not come up in a long time on 911, in a very unexpected way. She's revealed to be the ex-fiancée of Tommy, Buck's current boyfriend. What was your reaction to that storyline, and how did you work through that in the episode, and what it meant for Buck and Tommy's future, that he was evaluating his past sexuality? And Oliver Stark says, Abby was such a big turning point in Buck's life, as he mentions in the episode. So even though day to day in his conscious mind, he has very much moved on from that experience, I think it's pretty fair that finding out that your new partner used to be engaged to this hugely important relationship is somewhat jarring, to say the least.
Yeah.
And originally, we actually saw a couple more scenes of Buck dealing with this new information, one of which was a big talk with Peter Krause with Bobby, and Buck kind of just trying to trying to unpack it all. It was this wonderful coincidence that in season 1, Abby mentioned a fiance by the name of Tommy. I don't think at the time they knew they will be introducing many seasons later a character called Tommy, but it felt like it would be a missed opportunity to not kind of make that link and make the universe feel a little bit joined up. I think the opportunity presented itself, and it would have been silly to not take advantage of that and present Buck with an opportunity to spiral as he does so often.
I love when Oliver says the same things that we say.
Makes us
He's
feel
so
special.
smart with great
It's
opinions.
so nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We feel validated, don't we?
Yeah. Invoke Abby. That is the funniest phrasing. It's like a seance because she's haunting the narrative.
Invoke thy name or some shit like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I invoke you to ruin my relationship. Or maybe help my relationship by ruining it.
Oh my God.
Help me by ruining my relationship. Thank you so much. Help me in the greater scheme of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Also going back to how the whole Buck and Tommy relationship ended where it began, basically, right? Here's a couple quotes from an interview that both Oliver Stark and Tim Minear did with Entertainment Weekly. I think this is written by Patrick Gomez, titled 911's Oliver Stark on Buck and Tommy's shocking breakup. So Oliver says that, the breakup very much does come out of nowhere. I think Buck asking such a huge thing of Tommy by asking him to move in jolts him into almost having to make this decision for himself and for Buck. To me, the scene plays that Tommy has been hurt before and is scared of being hurt again. He's very much trying to protect himself, which I hold no judgment over. And yeah, unfortunately, Buck is just the casualty of that playing out. And Tim Minear comments as well, saying, I think Tommy probably went into this relationship realizing that at some point his heart would get broken. But it's just like, how broken? How much are you going to let somebody capture it? How broken do you want it by the end of it? It's worth it for him to have a broken heart here because he's with Buck and it's kind of great. Tommy knows that the bloom is going to fade off the rose at some point, and that if he took Buck up on his offer to move in, like he says, I know how this ends, which may be a stupid thing for Tommy or maybe a wise, self-protecting thing for Tommy. I would just like to have it point out here that we get more conjecture about Tommy's inner world and his motivations for why he does certain things through the interviews with the writers and the actors who are thinking about it, because they have to think about it. Oliver has to think about it from Buck's perspective, and Tim is thinking about it from both of those perspectives for both characters. But we get more kind of fleshing out of what would be going on in Tommy's mind in an article interview rather than in the actual text of the story. So while we know now that with comments like these, like that is the intentions of the writers, it's not stated as such in the actual text of the show through any of the dialogue or any of the, so much of a show is show don't tell. So they wouldn't even have to like speak about it per se, but it's also not shown. So what do we do with that? And this is all coming out afterwards. So it's just that little extra bit of context that we get to include into our reading of the storyline and the show as a whole. But that still doesn't negate the fact that it wasn't expressed as such in the show. Mm-hmm. This is all just like extra bonus stuff for us who are like chronically online and like to read all of the stuff about it,
Okay. So kind of talk about referring back to Mr. Plot Device in episodes 7 and 8, I guess, when he's like not there, but Buck is, dealing with the breakup and the call that never happens. Tommy never actually calls him and he doesn't call Tommy. This is from an article by Whitney Evans at TV Fanatic titled 911 Showrunner Tim Minear Talks Athena's Rookie, Bobby's Hot Shots Return, Buck's Heartache, and teases mid-season finale.
She covered it all.
She's All the things. She wrote, as Buck processes the end of that relationship with Tommy, Minear told us what we should expect from Buck's continued post-breakup period. And Tim Minear said, for Buck, now that he's discovered his bisexuality, I think at some point he says, I don't know what pawn to jump back into. For Buck, this isn't just like a normal post-breakup. He was discovering something about himself. And as Tommy said last week, you're still figuring out, and that's good. Buck's still figuring himself out. So I don't think it's as simple as the old hamster wheel of get together, let's move in together, break up, move on. For Buck, it's much more he has to turn his gaze onto himself, kind of in the way Eddie is for himself too.
Oh, the gaze?
Tim, the gaze. But also Fork Found in Kitchen, Tim Minear brings up Eddie when talking about someone else.
Every time.
Buck, every time.
Every time.
He's so us coded.
Yeah. I think we don't get along great.
Buck coded. Yeah. So just to backtrack so I can say this again. For Buck, it's much more he has to turn his gaze onto himself, kind of in the way Eddie is for himself too.
Oh, I'm so sure.
These guys are now at a stage in their lives where they're still kind of figuring out who they are. And I think that's particularly true for Buck. Although, in a way, Buck knows a little bit more about who he is after his relationship with Tommy, but there are a lot of possibilities open to him. Then Whitney writes, at one point during the hour, Eddie and Hen good-naturedly hide Buck's phone for him when he complains about whether or not he should call his ex. The call never happens, but it begs the question of whether or not Buck is ready to put that relationship in the past to move toward the future. When asked just that, Minear stated, yeah, I mean, he's going to be moving to what's in his future. And look, Tommy is in Buck's romantic past for sure.
For sure.
Sometimes I want video of these to hear the tone of voice, but it's like, I feel like I can hear it. You know?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that Tommy is necessarily not ever going to intersect with Buck in the universe again. Tommy is always going to be somebody who kind of opened a door for Buck. What did Rachel just talk about? The key for the closet door?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Aha.
Somebody who opened a door for Buck, and that's an important thing to be in somebody's life. So the importance was that he helped open a door for Buck. That's it.
For Buck.
But
he walked through, and then he closed it behind him. Bye.
This is like a nail in the coffin. I mean, like, Buck's moving to what's in his future, and look, Tommy is in Buck's romantic past for sure. Like, he's not.
Yeah.
There's no PR answer here.
No, that is dead, done.
Bones.
Buried.
Or dead.
40 feet under.
He did what he set out to do with this character.
Yeah.
He's done.
Which I know we were trying to find this article earlier. We're like almost 100% sure that Tim Minear has said almost verbatim. Yeah. I did what I set out to do with Tommy. Couldn't find the article. If you know which one it is, please let us know.
Pretty sure he used the word satisfied in there.
Okay, so last little bit I think we have in terms of quotes from articles regarding the Buck and Tommy relationship, right, is talking about how the breakup was premature on purpose, right? So there's an article from Decider written by Nicole Gallucci. I think we mentioned one of her other articles earlier, and it's titled 911 Boss Tim Minear Unpacks the Mid-Season Finale and Shares His Season 8 Goal to Blow It the Hell Apart. Quotes. It's going to be great for us. So this article came out with the mid-season finale, and the interviewer, Nicole, spoke with Tim, and she asked, for fans like Buck who are still processing his breakup with Tommy or feel like their connection was unexpectedly cut short, Minear agrees, but stresses that the move was intentional. And this is what he says. Look, I think the breakup was premature, but that was by design. For me, the story that I was trying to tell was, here's a guy, Tommy. He's not a main character on the show. We haven't done Tommy Begins or something. But you do see him in the Begins episodes, in flashbacks, and by the time he leaves in Bobby Begins Again, he's turned over a new leaf. Kind of. He's feeling more comfortable. He's hanging out with the new people at the 118 once Bobby takes over. And they throw him a party and bake him a cake where he goes off to his new post. There was even a reference in Broken when Chimney calls him to do the water drop. But Tommy's a guy who's in a different place in his life than Buck is. And I think what Tommy realizes is exactly what he said, which is, I'm not your last, I'm your first. That is a loaded statement here, right? Tommy is not a main character. He does not have a begins episodes, as in we don't get to learn more about his backstory. We see him around because he's an established character, and that's why they had him.
That's why he used him.
Yes.
He literally just said in a long-winded way, this was a plot device that I used by design.
Mm-hmm. Nicole Gallucci goes on to write that Tim Minear referenced the coffee shop scene in season 7, where Buck asked Tommy to give them another shot and to come to Maddie's wedding at a point when Tommy thought, all right, this guy's kind of great. He's super hot and he's sweet. And this will be nice. And I'm going to be vulnerable for this. As the relationship grew stronger and the stakes grew higher, however, Tommy reevaluated things. So another thing that Tim Minear went on to say in relation to that was, I think Tommy in the end understood that this was not forever, that Buck is exploring himself. He's still figuring himself out. And even if Tommy doesn't know it, he might sense the fact that Buck likes to jump in with both feet a little precipitously. Good SAT word.
Mm-hmm.
So was the breakup premature? Yes, because Tommy was put in a position where he had to be honest. And once he speaks the truth, which is, I think I know where things end, where this ends, and I can't move in with you, he's kind of breaking the spell of that honeymoon phase. Tommy even says, I didn't see this coming either. And then Tim says, I don't think either one of them did. So Buck and Tommy may not have seen that coming, but Tim did. And it was by design. The relationship ran its course. They got Buck to where they needed him to be, and then they broke them up. And Buck is a main character, so he stays in the narrative, and Tommy is not.
Period.
And that's on period. Or is it and that's on cap? I don't know. I don't
No, that's on period, and that's no cap. Anyways, you heard it here from the showrunners.
Listen,
from the showrunner himself. Like,
here's the proof, here's the facts, not just our observations and direct quotes from the show, but from the actors, Oliver and LFJ, but the showrunner, Tim Minear. I don't know what else we could possibly tell you.
And this hasn't really, besides what we kind of talked about with the racism and the sexism and the homophobia from Chimneys and Hens Begins episodes, we weren't talking about Tommy as a person. We were just literally talking about what he was there doing in the actual narrative of the story being told, and the fact that we don't see him, or the fact that like the narrative doesn't see him as a person, only a tool to be utilized in moving Buck's story forward, and sometimes a little bit of Eddie, but it's pretty much Buck. I mean, it's not even getting Eddie's storyline moving forward. It's
planting some seeds.
It's planting seeds. It's to provide a mirror to Eddie, like holding up a mirror for him, but it's really only
planting some jealousy.
Yeah, it's only moving forward Buck's storyline, because Tommy doesn't have his own storyline. Everything that we've just laid out here is how anything that he does is in relation or really revolves around one of our main characters. And that's what a plot device is.
That's what a plot device character is.
Yeah.
Or a MacGuffin, whatever you want. If you want to be specific with it, because you're like, well, so many things can be plot devices. You are correct.
And like how a lot of what role he plays in the story is very archetypal. It perpetuates a lot of tropes, which aren't necessarily a bad thing. I know
stereotypes.
I know some people think like tropes can be bad and because they're cliche, but like they serve a specific purpose.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But it's not anything more than what it is. I feel like I'm being very like,
No. This is the summary at the end of our paper.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
This is us being like, well, we showed you all the facts. in conclusion, we're correct.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode that you voted for. We hope you enjoyed it.
Our 5th grade persuasive essay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I hope you guys got a lot out of this.
I think this is the first episode that we've really done like a narrative and like production kind of lens on,
Mm-hmm.
which was cool. And if you guys want to see more of that in the future or anything specifically, let us know.
Yeah. If you have any requests or suggestions, we will totally take it into consideration. It is an interesting and I think slightly different way for us to analyze aspects of the show because usually, you know, we are so very like character centric.
Mm-hmm.
It is kind of interesting to like take a step back a little bit and look at it from this very like wide angle lens that encompasses
What's the big picture?
Yeah, that really encompasses
What's the point? Yeah.
the intentions of the people making the show.
Well, fam, I had a pretty good time with this. Just kind of like would like to take a break from talking about this man.
Redacted?
But unfortunately, he's so involved in the narrative as a plot device that I'm going to have to keep talking about him. But at least he's gone.
Good news.
He's good as dead.
The relationship is dead.
Is dead. The worst relationship there ever was. The enemy of all of us herein.
Buds. I don't know.
Oh, God. Okay. Remember, don't date a plot device.
But if you do,
Take a buddy with you.
And that's no cat.
I'm so done with you guys.
Thank you for listening to the Buddy System podcast from start to finish.
We literally cannot shut up about 911, so please come talk to us on your favorite social media platform.
We're at Buddy System Pod everywhere. That's BUDDIE System Pod. Leave a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts to get a personal shout out in the next episode. The Buddy System is a Nerdvergent media production featuring music from Divinity.
Can't get enough of the buddies? Subscribe to our Patreon for access to exclusive content in our Discord community.
Catch you next time, and don't forget,
Bring a buddy with you.